and welcome to the Thursday, April 2nd, 2026 regular meeting of the Boulder City Council. We're glad to have you here. We'll start, as I call this meeting to order, with a roll call, please.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Brockett. We'll start tonight's roll call as usual with Councilmember Adams.
Present.
Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Present.
Marquis.
Present.
Schuhart.
Here.
Spear.
Present.
Wallach.
Here.
And Mayor Pro Tem Weiner.
Present.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thanks so much. Alicia, could you go over the public participation guidelines, please?
Yes, sir. Be happy to. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your participation at tonight's council meeting. We ask that you abide by the rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code. This includes that participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by. Individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Only audio testimony is permitted during open comment. No attendees shall disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of any council meeting in a manner that obstructs the business of the meeting. This also includes failing to obey any lawful order of the presiding officer to leave the meeting room or refrain from addressing the council. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. And lastly, obscenity, other epithets based on race, gender, or religion, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the meeting will not be tolerated. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you for listening.
Thanks so much for that, Alicia. All right, we've got we had 20 people signed up, but one person withdrew, so we got 19 folks. Mix mostly in person, some virtual. I'm going to call 3 names at a time. Everyone will have 2 minutes to speak, and I will be strict about those time limits in the interest of fairness. So our first 3 speakers are Finn Rose and Kristen Eller in person, and then Laura Gonzalez virtually. So we'll start with Finn Rose.
Hi, my name is Finn Rose, and I go to Southern Hills Middle School. Tomorrow will be my year anniversary for my stroke. I had a stroke, so I basically lost all feeling on the right side of my body. I couldn't talk, I couldn't move my arm, I couldn't even walk. It was pretty crazy because I was very athletic before then. I did a lot of running. I got a 5:36 mile, which I feel super proud of. And I just did some really good running. I was super athletic. I was a very athletic person. But then when this hit, it was kind of just suddenly out of the blue. There was like nothing. It's called an AVM. There was nothing that led up to this. It was just a random malformation that happened. So it was just really random. And the rec center just helped me so much in my recovery. It just helped me because it was just always a good place where sometimes I'd feel like, oh man, I don't really want to go work out. Working out's like not that fun, you know? But then all of a sudden I come up there and then I get to the rec center and I'm like, you know what? It feels like, then you actually feel like you do it. Once you get there, you feel like you do it. But like at home, I don't feel like I do any of that stuff. I feel like I just kind of like sit there, oh, maybe I'll work out. But I just like actually get my workout in. I do the rowing machine is really helpful. That like grip thing at the rec center. And then I also do like lat pulls. And it's just like building back that strength in my right side. It's just really important. And I also love how I can get a well-rounded workout. Because this workout, you know, it has some important stuff like building that strength. But my PT and OT often have a lot of exercises that have to do. So for those exercises, that usually requires that additional room where I can work like on the Bosu ball. I have to focus a lot on my balancing Yeah.
So your time is up, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for your testimony. Thanks for coming to speak to us today. And and I'll note everyone quiet please. I'll just note our rules do prohibit making noise from the audience. For young people, we occasionally make an exception, but if everybody can please stay quiet through the rest of the testimony. All right, now we're going to go to Kristen Eller in person, and then Laura Gonzalez virtually, and Harry Ross in person. Is Kristen here? So it looks like Kristen is not here, so we'll come back and see if she's here before the end of open comment. So we'll go to Laura Gonzalez online.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I need 1 second because I wasn't ready for right now. Can you please restart my time?
Please continue.
Finally, I get to speak. The suppression of proud Palestinian voices is real. And the most ironic thing, the so-called progressive city council members are revealing their own ancestral and current fascism. This council would rather partner with real estate developers and surveillance tech like Flock, technology that violates our Fourth Amendment rights. Chief Redfern lied to the city manager when he said we're not sharing data with other states. As a matter of fact, the pigs are out here harassing people. We are, and our private information or cars or faces is being used right now by multiple states. The same technology is murdering Palestinians in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank, and recently killed over 170 girls in Iran with our tax dollars. That Tomahawk technology was guided by Ball Aerospace, a former Boulder company now bought by Bay Systems, which has an office right here in our city. You refuse to pass an anti-Islamophobia resolution, yet you passed 3 Israeli-related resolutions. And ironic that you say you don't get into international affairs, huh? So let me be clear. I demand divestment from genocide, divest from Apple, Cisco, Microsoft, Nicole Spear. Have your husband sell his stocks and you're okay profiting from the murder of innocent schoolgirls. Divest from Caterpillar, Toyota, and Flock. You claim to exclude fossil fuels, firearms, and mass incarceration firms, but Flock profits from deportation and detention centers. And what about BI Inc., paid by ICE to act as bounty hunters? Where are your investment principles now? Most of you call yourself Democrats, but the Colorado Democratic Party platform says Israel's committing genocide in Gaza and that AIPAC should register as a foreign agent. Denounce Israel and AIPAC now. It's the bare minimum. You've silenced those of us who care about other humans. And sure, I might be next, but trust me, they'll come for all of you eventually, even the Jewish supremacists in this council. Free Palestine, fuck Israel, death to the
No,
IOF,
that's
death to the USA,
obscenities.
and stop
We're
paying the pigs so
give
much.
your time now.
We need it.
That. Right. Before we go to the next person, I'll just note that our rules of decorum allow for one sign to be held at a time. So just please, one sign only. All right, now let's go to Harry Ross in person, then Autumn Archer and Rachel Rose Isaacson also in person. Just press the button on the mic, please. There you go.
Are we on?
Yep.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Harry Ross. In 2023, I presented to this city a template and a roadmap to bring unleaded fuel to the airport. And over time, much of that got incorporated into the state's bill, which now airports across the state are using to convert to unleaded fuel. It's a great thing. And I'm really excited that Boulder is going to join that group. By my rough count, about 75% of the aircraft at the airport can use unleaded fuel with the appropriate approvals, and I have commitments from about 50% of the fuel sold on the airport that they'll convert the day you bring unleaded fuel there. So this is a real thing that will happen right away. This is for the fuel that's available right now. And in 3 to 6 months, the next generation of fuel is out that 100% of the aircraft should be able to use. So we really are on our way to being done with that stuff. And I applaud the city and everybody that worked on this to get it done. In addition to that, I want to just dangle out there that electric aircraft are coming up fast, and that solves so many other issues that everybody is worried about, is interested in, is concerned about, and it really is the future of transportation, not just for aviation, but for anybody that wants to move around. I do want to send out a shout out to the new airport manager, Eric Bensis. He is doing a fantastic job, and it is so great to have somebody that understands a community airport like that and is working to help the airport community and the local community come together and really make this the best it can be. Thank you all.
All right, thank you. All right, all the remaining speakers are in person. So we've got Autumn Archer, then Rachel Rose Isaacson, and Penelope Heller.
All right. Make sure this is on. Okay. Good evening, Council. My name is Autumn Archer. I'm a labor organizer with the Boulder Area Labor Council with the AFL-CIO. I am here tonight to speak on behalf of Boulder's workers, to speak to the desperate struggle faced by so many families and young workers across our city. As the cost of living continues to rise within our community, as the cost of living continues to rise in our community, and to the importance of maintaining tipped wages in accordance with the 302 tipped offset standard already set by the state of Colorado, we have heard from members of this council in regards to supposedly high incomes of tipped wage earners working in the city's restaurant industry, including one figure that in particular purported that the average tip worker earns a grand total of $72,000 a year. This is false. This figure omits entirely two crucial details impacting the earnings of tipped workers across the U.S. First, that tips are inconsistent, varying night to night, week to week, season by season. And secondly, the pervasive issue of wage theft within the restaurant industry and the lack of clear oversight ensuring that tipped wage earners do not have their tipped earnings stolen or minimum wage credit withheld during periods of time which the tipped income falls below the threshold of being equivalent to the hourly minimum wage. According to a report published by One Fair Wage in July of 2024, restaurant workers on average make just 30% of the national median income, $15,198, and as many as 46 of these tipped earners don't even make $13,850, the income threshold for a single individual to be required to pay federal income tax. Changes to the wage schedule for tip workers is set to exacerbate the affordability crisis already faced by so many and risks plunging our most vulnerable residents further into the nightmare of economic instability. I ask you tonight to unequivocally oppose
Your
any cuts to
time
the
is
city's
up,
sub-minimum
but
wage
thank you
standards.
very
Thank
much
you.
for your testimony. And no noise from the audience, please. Thank you. All right, now we're going to go to Rachel Rose Isaacson, Penelope Heller, and Sunny Vanderstar.
All right, did I press this? Okay, it's already on. All right, good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Rachel Rose Isaacson. As you know, I am here as a former City Council candidate and a tipped wage worker. I want to acknowledge that this is a complex moment. Workers and businesses alike are struggling. But in navigating that complexity, I urge you not to lose sight of workers who often don't have a voice in rooms like this. A recent hotline said that a potential proposal to freeze the tipped wage credit so that our wages do not increase with the rising minimum wage until 2019, under the belief that the average tipped employee is working full-time, making $72K a year at $40 an hour. I wish. The real lived experience of tipped workers is not as glamorous as you're imagining, not even close. This is the real picture of our lives. Tipped workers are often working 2 to 3 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck just to cover monthly rent and basic necessities. These are folks struggling to afford groceries, parents trying to afford something as simple as a haircut for their kids, and workers putting off dental care, hoping that they get to it before it becomes an emergency. People with cars needing major repairs that they need to get to work when public transport is inaccessible. Each day feels like a gamble for so many. Adding further instability and less base pay as cost of living goes up could sadly contribute to the devastating impacts when our social services are already strained. This reality needs to be acknowledged. But I also want to acknowledge that small businesses are struggling. High commercial rent, unpredictable utilities, and when Excel turns our powers off, my restaurant, we are losing full days of pay, including me. I don't get to get paid either. These are uncertain economic times, and these are real pressures, and we need to support our local businesses and build a more resilient economy. I understand the need for these hard topic discussions to help restaurants stay afloat in these times, to keep jobs available and keep our community vibrant, but we need solutions that don't shift that burden onto workers who are already on the edge. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we have Penelope Heller, Sonny Vanderstar, and Matthew Turk.
Hi, my name is Penny Heller, and these are my friends Aria and Kinley. This is my third time attending a city council meeting. First time, I was not excited. I had to finish all my homework right away after school and have a really early dinner so we could get a parking spot and a good seat. And then we get here, and there are so many adults and even police officers, and lots of boring words that I don't really understand, like budget and taxes, but also new ones I learned, like equity in the 15-minute neighborhood. But now I want to be here. Look, I'm at the podium. You see, my little brother and I moved here from Texas a few years ago. I don't know if you know this, but Texas is really big, like really big. We had to get in our car to go anywhere. My parents wanted a better childhood for us, so we landed here in beautiful Boulder. We immediately got all new bikes, scooters, we even got e-bikes. Now we scoot to school, ride our bikes to our friends' houses, and to the South Boulder Rec Center. And we'll even e-bike to Sun for Friday night dinner. I'm really sad and confused why Boulder may not keep the South Boulder Rec Center. All the other kids in Boulder can ride their bikes, walk, and scoot to their rec centers. Why can't we? We're all equal members of this community. We should all be in a 15-minute neighborhood that includes access to an awesome rec center with a pool, gym, and all the great other features. My friends here and I really hope you'll choose fairness and equity for us kids and for the future of all South Boulder families. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much for coming and speaking to us, Penelope. That was amazing. All right. Now we have Sonny Vanderstar, and then Matthew Twerk and Aldo Anglade.
Good evening, Council. The South Boulder Recreation Center is not just an isolated building. It is the heart of a vibrant ecosystem, nestled between two schools, a city park, a lake, and a densely populated, economically diverse neighborhood. Yet for years, this heart has been allowed to decline. Services were reduced or suspended, and unsurprisingly, visitor numbers dropped. Now those numbers are being used to claim that there isn't enough demand to justify meaningful investment. That logic is flawed. You don't measure demand for a bridge by counting how many people swim across the river after the bridge is closed. South Boulder has been trapped in a least visited, therefore least valuable mindset. This has become institutionalized in our budgets and our programming, but what's missing isn't demand, it's vision. Years ago, when I served on PRAB, we were asked to imagine a future headline. Mine still holds. Boulder celebrates the opening of the South Boulder Community Hub, a space that promotes nature, culture, wellness, and wisdom. Imagine a place where a rec center is more than just a gym, where pools and fitness spaces are combined with a library, senior and teen spaces, childcare, and community services. A place designed for connection and resilience. If we get this decision right, more headlines will follow. Stronger programming, deeper intergenerational connections, and yes, visitor numbers at an all-time high. This will happen not because we market better, but because we finally invested in a place where people actually live and a place people already love. This is your opportunity, not just to replace a building, but to create something truly meaningful. I urge you to stop seeing South Boulder as a low-demand, low-priority area and start seeing it for what it truly is, a high-potential, high-impact one. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Matthew Twerk, Aldo Anglade, and Pam Unrau.
Hello, my name is Matthew Turk. I'm in third grade at Bear Creek Elementary. I live right across the park from the South Boulder Rec Center. I think the rec center is important because it brings people to enjoy the park, and people of all ages, from kids to adults, can go there. In November, I had my 19th birthday at the rec center. It was so fun for me and my friends. I also like that it didn't cost my parents too much money and that we could just walk there instead of driving 30 minutes like we have to do for lots of other birthdays parties. My brother Charlie is 15 years old, and he goes to Fairview High School. And he plays football and baseball. He works out at the South Boulder Rec Center. He can walk there after school or on the weekends because he can't drive yet. When I'm 15 years old, I hope I can work out at the rec center too. I hope you decide to give the South Boulder Rec Center money so it can keep all of the fun things for the people in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for coming and speaking to us. All right, we're going to go now to Aldo Anglade, Pam Unrau, and Brenda Lee.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Aldo. I am 8 years old, and I am here to save a pool. I am on a swim team here in Boulder. I usually train at the East Boulder Rec Center, but there is also a swim team at the South Boulder Recreation Center. Pools like this are really important for kids like me. The South Boulder Rec Center is also walking distance from my house. It is the only pool I can go without a car. This is not just about me, it also affects my friends from Bear Creek Elementary, and you can see that by now how many of them are here today. I love swimming. It helps me get stronger, work hard, and be part of a team. I heard the South Boulder pool might close, and that makes me really sad. This pool is important for many kids and families. Swimming is not just a sport, it is also a life skill that helps keep people safe. If the pool closes, many kids will lose a place where they can learn, grow, and feel happy. Please think about kids when you make your decision. We need places like this in our community. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Aldo, for coming and speaking to us. All right, now we go to Pam Unrau, Brenda Lee, and Kyle Ames.
Good evening. You're being asked to make an important decision about the South Boulder Rec Center, one that will affect many lives.
Can you get into the mic, please?
Sure. But the data you've been given doesn't even include the option of saving the current building, and a rebuild isn't considered until after $138 million is spent at the North and East Rec Centers. The claim that the facility is at its end of life is based on staff opinion, not actual cost analysis. No repair quotes were gathered, and without real numbers, how can anyone fairly compare renovation and adding on to rebuilding? And who made this assessment? Was it staff in an office or professionals who actually do this kind of work? There's also the question of historic value. This is a mid-century modern building modeled after Frank Lloyd Wright's designs. Has that significance been evaluated? By not supporting this center with a good gym and pool, yet investing so much in the North and East centers, kids would lose a safe, active alternative to hours on social media, which really concerns me as a retired Boulder Valley School District teacher. Older adults may stop coming if they have to drive across town, leading to isolation and declining health. Those impacts don't disappear. They can shift into greater demand for city services like the juvenile justice system, drug rehab and mental health services, and an increase in senior services over time. And what about the quality of life? Many residents already feel overlooked. When funding flows to other rec centers but not this one, it raises a fair question. Who is setting these priorities? So, will your decision be based on incomplete information?
Your time is up, but
Oh,
thank you for your testimony. All right, now we'll go to Brenda Lee and then Kyle Ames and Aiden Reed.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brenda Lee, and I'm the Executive Director of Boulder Bear Coalition, a nonprofit that works to reduce human bear conflict through education, policy, and implementing innovative programs. I'm also the Executive Director of Colorado Bear Coalition, which was formed because of the successes we had here in Boulder going back 15 years. So I'm here tonight to introduce myself and to highlight a project we're currently working on, and we're working with Boulder City planning staff on. So Colorado Parks and Wildlife documented 78 bear euthanizations statewide in 2025. Many of those were preventable. Drought conditions this year is going to exacerbate that problem. Boulder has never been immune to this issue, so we're expecting to see a worse year this year. Over the last 15 years working here locally, one of the issues we've really has highlighted is where bears are moving and why through town. One of the things that really stands out is hobby beehives and hobby chicken coops, and bears are moving through those areas. So one of the most effective, humane tools we have available is e-fencing, and the kind that CPW already subsidizes for larger commercial use. The challenge is that in Boulder, our ordinance is quite outdated. So we're working with the city to make update to that ordinance so that residents can legally install fencing and also more easily. The permitting process is also quite cumbersome. So with the volunteer working through CU Law School right now, he's been working with us this semester on this project. And so we're looking at updating that code. We've heard from the city planning that they have
Your
a
time is up,
comprehensive plan.
I'm afraid, but thank you for your testimony. And now we'll go to Kyle Ames, Aiden Reed, and Ryan Bennett.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Kyle Ames, and I'm probably the newest resident of Boulder in this room, as I moved here in December after buying a house across the street from the South Boulder Recreation Center. I wanted to speak tonight because the center is not just a building to me. It's one of the reasons I moved to Boulder, and one of the reasons I chose to buy a home in that specific neighborhood. When I was deciding where to live, I was looking for more than just a house. I was looking for a real community as I was moving across the country from Philadelphia from all my family and friends. A place where people know each other, just like in Cheers, where families gather, where people of all ages have somewhere healthy, welcoming, and affordable to go. The South Boulder Rec Center represented exactly that. And since moving here, it has absolutely lived up to that expectation. Not just for me, but for others my age that are moving to the area, particularly South Boulder, to build families. I go to the rec center almost every day, sometimes twice a day. I see Finn very regularly. It has become part of the rhythm of my life. It's a place where I've worked on my physical health, my mental health, and honestly just my sense of connection to the community. I've made friends, and I've had a lot of philosophical conversations in the sauna, which I guess is its own kind of community benefit. But truly, this place matters. My best friend visited me last week. He's from an immigrant family in Philadelphia, where recreation centers often aren't well funded and don't feel like places where people are excited to use. After visiting South Boulder, he looked around and said, wow, this is what America thinks recreation centers should be like. This is where I want my parents to go, and that's where I want my parents to go when they move here. He was right. This center is what people hope for when imagining a strong community, a clean, safe, family-friendly, welcoming public space that helps people live healthier and more connected lives. So I hope that, please don't close it, please fund it, please protect this space for the people and families who rely on it.
Your time is up, but thanks so much for your testimony. All right, now we're going to go to Aiden, all right, folks in the basement. Aiden Reed, then Ryan Bennett, and then Andrew Bursick.
Good evening, Council. My name is Aiden Reed. I am here tonight to urge you to not freeze Boulder's tip base wage at $13.80. Boulder is at risk of becoming a lower altitude Vail or Aspen. The trend is already occurring. Those with the wealth and ability to live here do so, while those without the capital either rent or live in other communities throughout the county. If Council freezes Boulder's tip base wage, it will be another step towards turning Boulder into a permanent tourist destination, not a thriving community where working class people have a chance to live dignified, full lives. Workers' current take-home pay is the minimum wage plus tips, just slightly higher than the current minimum wage. So any increase in the tip minimum wage credit is money out of workers' pockets, which benefits neither them nor small businesses. I imagine most, if not all of you, worked a minimum wage job with tips at some point in your life. Imagine if you had to work that same job with Boulder's current tipped minimum wage credit in Boulder today. Could you do it? Do you think you could save for retirement, pay rent, afford groceries, or have any money left over to enjoy life? We are consigning Boulder's working class, the people who make the rest of our lives possible, to a permanent underclass status. And lowering the tip minimum wage credit at a time of nearly unprecedented economic uncertainty and inequality will only exacerbate this. I urge you to be brave, be forward-thinking, and make a decision that empowers Boulder and its workers to thrive. Without them, we won't have a city.
Thank you. Now we have Ryan Bennett and Andrew Bursick and Linda Gerstel.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Ryan Bennett. I've had the chance to review the recreation center scenarios from Parks and Rec, and I'm concerned that the current approach lacks the clarity, the equity, and the financial discipline required when investing hundreds of millions of dollars. First, South is being asked to accept a fundamentally different facility. The two options on the table for South aren't minor variations. One preserves a pool and a gym, the other eliminates them entirely in favor of an indoor field house. That's not a design choice. It's an irreversible loss for our community. Second, there is only one trade-off in the entire packet. South is being asked to lose core amenities while North and East are maintaining and even expanding their offerings. We support strong recreation across all of Boulder, but South isn't being asked to share the burden, it's being asked to carry it alone. When one community is forced to sacrifice while others gain, you don't build a city, you build resentment. A city that plans this way fractures the communities it's meant to serve. Third, eliminating a pool doesn't align with Boulder's own vision. The city recently reaffirmed its commitment to 15-minute neighborhoods. Community members have been very clear. The pool isn't a luxury, it's a core amenity. Eliminating it in favor of a field house, a nice-to-have magnet at best, flies in the face of what this community has asked for and what the city has committed to. If decisions don't reflect that commitment, the Boulder Comprehensive Plan is just words on a page. Lastly, the return on investment demands a harder look. The packet lays out options to spend $50 to $70 million at both North and East for what's described as minimum building improvements. That's not new building level spending, or that's new building level spending without new building level value. Every dollar of capital must deliver a strong return, and these scenarios don't meet that bar. Our ask is to, one, prioritize capital to rebuild the South Boulder Rec Center.
Your time is up, but thank you so much for your testimony.
You for your time.
All right, now we're going to go to Andrew Bursick, Linda Gerstel, and Lucy Carlson Krakoff.
Hi, I'm Ender Bursick. I'm 8 years old and I live in South Boulder. I heard the city might build a really big, amazing rec center in East Boulder. I think that sounds really cool. I'm excited to use it when I can get a ride there. But I really like my rec center in South Boulder too. We swim there. We play basketball there. My parents work out there. That's where I go after school because it's safe and I can walk there with my friends. Having a rec center close to home really matters. So I don't understand why one part of Boulder would get something really nice while another part might lose important things like our pool or a gym. Why can't we have two good rec centers in our own neighborhoods? If there's only one amazing rec center far away,
Some kids won't be able to go very often. Some families might not be able to go at all. This feels like a bad idea for Boulder. Boulder is a smart city. I think we can also be a fair city that takes care of all its neighborhoods. Please don't make one side of town feel less important. Please keep our rec center the way it is for the kids and families who depend on it. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much. Quiet, please. But thanks so much, Ander. Really appreciate you coming and speaking to us today. So now we have Linda Gerstel, then Lucy Carlson Krakoff, and Caden Bennett.
Good evening. My name is Linda Gerstel. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. My in-laws were Kurt and Eva Gerstel. They were among the many folks who campaigned in 1967 for the dedicated sales tax for open space. It is up to us now to carry forward this work. Public lands in the United States are threatened. Here at home, we all care about open space. I want our precious lands to be protected forever. I believe this is a foundational value for Boulder citizens. So perhaps this weekend, you can go for a walk in a forest on open space. Maybe you will see a bear which has emerged from its den. Or maybe you'll see some pasque flowers newly opened. Or maybe a child playing among the ponderosa pines. And I hope that you will be reminded that our wild places are invaluable, and that your and my stewardship of our open space lands is what the legacy of those that came before us will have an opportunity to continue. So please, please choose to not move forward with the ballot measure which would change the dedicated open space tax. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last two speakers are Lucy Carlson Krakoff and Caden Bennett.
Hello, I'm Lucy. I'm a Boulder resident. I'm also a bilingual prenatal specialist at Clinica, Boulder's only medical clinic for low-income residents. I'm here to speak against the proposed increase to the tipped wage credit, which would result in a wage cut. I think a better solution would be to explore the residential and commercial vacancy tax, which is being proposed for the November ballot by local citizens. The vacancy tax would provide an incentive to landlords to lower rents for commercial properties like restaurants on Pearl. This is a solution to the increasing business costs rather than having to cut wages. So if you'd like to sign in support of this vacancy tax, you can find me after. I'm a volunteer. One option being proposed is a wage freeze, in which the regular minimum wage will continue to go up, but the tipped minimum wage will stay the same. An increase to the tipped credit from $302 to $437 would be a decrease in take-home pay by over $2,000 per worker who works 35 hours per week at least, and is a huge difference to the median tipped worker making only $17 to $22 an hour total, struggling to make ends meet. At surface level, it may seem the workers this affects will take home the same amount, but their buying power will reduce every year due to inflation. I see the impacts of low wages and wage theft every day at my work, serving patients. These results are plainly poverty and poor health outcomes. Most of my patients work full-time in tipped wage jobs. They are line cooks, janitors, hotel workers, etc. And we can pay the rec center workers a great wage. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last speaker is Caden Bennett.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Caden Bennett, and I'm 14 years old. I go to Fairview High School, where I play both soccer and basketball. I'm here to talk about something really important to me, the South Boulder Rec Center and its pool. As an athlete, my body takes a lot of impact. Running, cutting, jumping. It's hard on my ankles and joints pretty much every day. After practices and games, the pool is the one place where I can recover without making things worse. Swimming helps me stay in shape without putting more stress on my body. It's how I keep going during long seasons. Without it, I honestly don't know how I'd stay healthy enough to keep playing the sports I love. But it's not just about sports. The rec center is part of my routine. It's where I go to reset, to focus, and to take care of myself. A lot of kids like me use it. Not just athletes, but people who need a place to move and hang out with friends. I've heard people talk about replacing the pool with a field house. But for me, and a lot of others, the pool isn't extra. It's essential. You can't replace what the pool does with something else. I'm asking you to really listen to the community, especially kids like me. South Boulder Rec Center is a place that kids can walk to. Boulder is an expensive city. My parents have to go to work and can't drive me whenever I want. So having this center accessible in the middle of our community is the best thing for so many kids. This impacts our health, our routines, and the things we work hard for every day. Please don't take away something that helps so many of us stay active, healthy, and strong. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Caden, for coming and speaking to us. All right, that brings us, unless Kristen Eller has come here, which I haven't seen her, that brings us to the end of open comment. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and speaking to us. But I'd like to particularly thank the young people. Your words were incredibly inspiring, and I'm so grateful to you for coming out and joining us today. Oh, apparently Kristen is here. Let's bring her up quick. All right, Kristen, you'd be our last speaker.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry I wasn't here earlier. There's just so many people here that care. But I'm here to speak in favor of people that are working in Boulder getting paid a wage to be able to live here and thrive and succeed. There was a lot of work that went into the decisions that were made in terms of, I just sprinted up the stairs. I'm out of shape. There was a lot of work that went into deciding what we do in increasing minimum wage and how we move going forward. And I don't want us to backtrack. We don't have enough information to make a decision currently, and I want us to be very aware that any decision we make right now impacts a lot of people and impacts their livelihood. Things that we probably, or I'm guessing a number of you probably will not feel. You won't be impacted. You're not making minimum wage and rely on tips. I understand that currently the business dynamics and thriving restaurants is a very critical question that we need to look at, but I think there's a lot of different ways that we can come at this to have the best outcome. The best outcome in terms of making sure our minimum wage workers are able to have successful lives and not have to worry about the next paycheck, about health insurance, about what they can pay for, and that they can still also have their jobs, and that we're going to continue having a thriving economy in Boulder by looking at other avenues, including ways that we can make things easier for our restaurants. I'd also like to thank everyone who's come out here and all the different things that you're working on in terms of looking at the rec centers and the minimum wage workers, and that we're all working towards the success of Boulder, and I think you guys can do that if we think very critically.
Thank you. All right, that was our last speaker, so I'll turn to city staff to see if you have any responses.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and I too, I have to say that I'm so amazed to see the next generation of civic leaders here, so passionate about the rec centers as we're moving forward. And what I see is a lot of passion, right? I see a lot of passion about recreation facilities, a lot of passion we have certainly heard today once, but we have been getting emails about open space, and those are all decisions that we're thinking about as we move forward. I just want to say I have the honor to serve with tremendous amount of staff who are professional who are bringing financial, architectural, parks, services, data to the table for a hard conversation that is holistic and comprehensive. And it is intended to serve the interests of everyone in Boulder. I hope that you're continue to be with us and as passionate as we work through some of the really hard decisions that we are working on together for the benefit of our community. I hope you're watching next week as we bring some of that information contextually, all of it together to council and thus to community. But I appreciate and welcome the conversation that has happened, because I think it's really important for us to continue to hear, to continue to push ourselves to think about what our community is needing, but we need to always think about what is the community asking for holistically. So I'm excited to see what the conversation will look like next week as we continue to move the conversation forward. I hope that folks are also paying attention to the Fund Our Future conversation, where you can go on the website and actually help us do some of that prioritization by lending us your voice in that matter. And the only other issue I'll say is we've also heard a little bit about tip credit, and because we're going to be talking about that later on today, I will leave that where it's at.
Thanks. Teresa?
Nothing from me, Mayor.
Very good. Any clarifying questions from council members to city staff? Clarifying question.
I just had one about the bears. I missed the fencing. Can someone just speak briefly about the bear situation? Thank you.
Yes, what our speaker was talking about is a proposal for electric fencing that is powered by battery or solar power, so low voltage. There was a proposal, a proposed ordinance that was submitted to the city, and we have that. We have taken it under consideration. Certainly, that's something that we would be looking to council for, about whether that's something council is interested in taking up in the future.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. Council members can speak up to 30 seconds to address open comment if they would like. I saw Rob and Nicole.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I hear you about the South Boulder Rec Center. It is true that the kids are talking about fun and the adults are talking about budget. And he was pretty accurate on that. But I'm looking forward to some real numbers. I know that a community of our size needs the pool capacity. And to Nuria's point, Fund Our Future, our facilities assessment, and exploring ballot measures, I hope that paints a much clearer picture so we can move forward.
Thanks. Nicole?
I just wanted to say thank you as well to everybody who came out tonight, and just tell you, as a South Boulder resident, there's only 2 of us up here, just so excited to see so many South Boulder people. That is not something we see very often, so thank you. And really just encourage people to participate in the Fund Our Future online activity, as well as some of the engagement things that are coming up. It's really important for people who Parks and Rec is an important thing for. Show up, engage in that conversation, please. It's critical. Just Google long-term financial strategy, City of Boulder. It'll take you right there.
Thanks. Tara?
I just wanted to say, the kids, you stole the show again. This was the best open comment ever. That's what I got.
Thanks. All right, not seeing any other hands raised. I'll just say thanks again to everybody for coming out. It was some inspiring speaking, particularly from the young people. So grateful to you for coming and addressing your local government. And we will be keeping your comments very much in mind as we move to next week's discussion about the future of our facilities. So thanks everybody for coming out. And with that, that ends open comment, and I'll take us into a recess until 6:30. Kindly please be seated or head out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call us back to order and move on to item 3A, which is the Arts Week Declaration being presented by Councilmember Benjamin. And we are also being joined by a special guest, who is Nicholas Felder, who is a Black queer artist, composer, vocalist, and educator pursuing his doctorate of musical arts at CU Boulder, except newsflash, just received his doctorate of musical arts on Tuesday. Congratulations, Nicholas. Dr. Felder, I should say, whose work builds community and creates space for authentic expression, and this year's Boulder Arts Week Bright Futures Award recipient. Take it away, Matt.
Take it away, Nicholas. Boulder Arts Week continues to be the city's premier celebration for our community's artists and vibrant arts and cultural offerings. Now in its 12th year, Boulder Arts Week 2026 will feature performances, exhibitions, and creative experiences from musicians, dancers, actors, authors, and artists of all media, with events in every Boulder neighborhood. Boulder's creative sector is a defining community strength and economic driver. Boulder ranks third in the nation for concentration of artists and among the top 10 most arts-vibrant mid-sized cities in the U.S. With creative employment 3 times the national average, Americans for the Arts estimates Boulder's nonprofit arts and culture industry generates $115.1 million in economic activity in 2022, spanning $53.5 million in organizational spending and $61.6 million in audience expenditures. Creativity is core to Boulder's quality of life and future success. The arts strengthen community identity, drive innovation, enhance well-being, and play a critical role in advancing Boulder's generational goals. This year, during Boulder Arts Week, Boulder also launches the Boulder Arts Blueprint, a long-term strategic plan that establishes a framework for how the city will invest and support in creative community for years to come. For over a decade, Boulder Arts Week has amplified the visibility of the arts and encouraged community members to support and engage with their local creative community. This year, we again will invite all community members to participate, celebrate, and champion the arts in Boulder. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare April 3rd to April 12th, 2026 as Boulder Arts Week. This is for you. You can Thank you so much. That's a great way to do a declaration. Yes, absolutely. No, we thought you were going to play and talk at the same time.
A couple notes I just want to bring up. All right. Well, hello, Mayor and City Council. Thank you. I am deeply honored to accept this Boulder Arts Week declaration on behalf of the Boulder arts community. I am this year's Boulder Arts Week Bright Futures Award recipient and one of thousands of creatives, artists, organizers, educators, and young people who show up every day here for meaningful work. In my own life, art has played an impactful role, serving as a tool for me to express the fullness of my identities. And I have had the privilege of witnessing similar folks be able to express the fullness of their selves through art as well. I'm so grateful to be receiving this declaration during such a meaningful moment for Boulder's creative community. The Boulder Arts Blueprint reflects a bold commitment to building a welcoming, creative community. The blueprint affirms that creativity is core to who we are as a community and that every community member deserves access to that vibrant cultural life. That vision deeply aligns with my own practice, work, and values. And yet again, I am honored to accept this declaration. Thank you.
Thanks again. Congratulations. Thanks for being here.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Dr. Felder, for joining us for that lovely and moving performance. All right, we're going to move now to our consent agenda. Please, Elisha.
Yes, sir. Such a beautiful performance. Our consent agenda tonight is item number 4 on the agenda, and it consists of items 4A through 4Q.
Great. Do we have any questions or comments on the consent agenda? Taisha?
I did. It was regarding F, which is the consideration of a motion to authorize the city manager to execute a 10-year water lease agreement with the town of Erie. And I just really appreciated the, one, I initially saw that, and again, given the 3 drops of snow that we got this year, the idea that we're going to give or lease agree, for 10 years, I was a little nervous. And so it was really helpful to have some of the responses that was shared by city staff regarding this. And obviously it's in the extensive memo, but for those of us and others, just regular folk who are looking, who may not read every page, if you could share some of the highlights of what was shared and the considerations that were made for this critical issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Council Member, and I'm happy to start, and I know our Director of Utilities is out there, and if I say anything wrong, he's going to jump over and correct me, so I see him poised. But I will say, as many of you know, the City of Boulder has entered a drought watch period, and that is a designation that our amazing professional staff in our utilities department, they are constantly monitoring what we need as a community, where our water levels are, and they would not enter into such agreement if it would put our own water supply in jeopardy. We know that the City of Erie is in a different situation because they are making some maintenance repairs on the reservoir that support them. This amount of water is very minimal. This lease is minimal. It does not in any way jeopardize the water demands that we have in a city, and we have protections in that lease that were situations to change. We could then also go in and negotiate a different outcome, but we do not in any way, shape, or form think that this puts us in any jeopardy at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And when I asked for our city to look at the water supply last year, I was hopeful that we would be having more iterative conversations in preparation for the integrated water plan, which will be discussed next year. But unfortunately, because our council priorities were only 1 year in length, we won't have that runway to make that 2 years. So I just appreciate having just even these small opportunities to normalize discussions about water and to increase water literacy around our community. We're going to have some very, very hard conversations coming up even in the next few months. And so, again, just normalizing these conversations and lifting things off of consent agenda so that people who may not have time, energy, or expertise to go into the weeds, but can have a general understanding like what you just shared. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Mark?
My comment relates to item H and Resolution 1374, establishing a framework to guide planning of a future service area expansion for Area 3. I just wanted to thank staff and congratulate staff. I think that the draft resolution captured every concern and every point that was raised when we last discussed this matter, and I think it was really a first-rate job in drafting. So thank you very much.
And if I may colloquy, I'll echo those thanks and also appreciate the planning board looking at our reconsideration request on that as well. Tina?
Yeah, my question is on P, which is about the sales tax on the battery storage systems. And one, it was just to understand the timing of that, when the community might benefit from that from that ordinance change, and also the fiscal impact is $29,000. It felt low. Is that what we would anticipate rebates being?
Councilmember, I'm going to have to, I don't have it right in front of me, so I'm going to have to get back to you on the timing of that. I do believe the fiscal impact is accurate. It's an extension of what we already do. Do I see Jonathan? Oh. Anyway, I can get back to you with those details. Thank you.
That works. I think it's great, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm very
Terrific.
responsive to what we've heard from our community, so thank you.
Terrific.
Taisha, she has something else.
Well, I was going to ask to actually have that one pulled because I would want to vote differently than probably the majority. So I'm still not good on the technicalities of when that happens.
If
so
you
I
want
just
to,
defer your judgment.
when we vote on the consent agenda, you're welcome to vote, say yes on everything except no on
There we
item
go.
such
Thank
and
you. I
such.
just needed that.
Okay.
Thank you. It's not often that I have to say no on things. Thank you.
No worries. Yes,
Mayor, I'm sorry. Jonathan Cohen was here and reminded me in a quick message that timing is immediate.
Okay, anything else on the consent agenda or perhaps a motion?
I move the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Can we do a roll call, please, Alicia?
Yes, sir, thank you. We'll start the roll call on tonight's consent agenda items 4A through 4Q with Councilmember Adams.
I am a yes on the consent agenda except for item I, the Area 3, per the concerns that I had before and belief that we already have enough in Area 1. Thank you.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
Wallach.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Weiner.
Yes.
The consent agenda items 4A through 4Q are hereby approved unanimously with the noted nay from Councilmember Adams.
Thanks, Alicia. Can we go to our call-ups, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our call-up check-ins are item number 5 on tonight's agenda. 5A is the consideration of a site review amendment to the Boulder Jewish Commons Lot 2B located at 6018 Oric Avenue for the development of a new synagogue. This is reviewed under case number LUR 2025-00031.
Any questions, comments, or desire to call this one up? Not seeing any. Can we go to item B, please?
Yes, sir. Item 5B is our consideration of a left-hand water district's request for comment regarding a water tap for a property in Area 3 Rural Preservation of the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan. The address referenced is 4360 North 55th Street.
Any questions, comments, or desire to call this one up? Not seeing any. Let's go to item C, please.
5C is the consideration of a site review to redevelop the site at 1100 28th Street and 2895 East College Avenue into a mixed-use student housing development with 149 units and 3 buildings. This is reviewed under case number LUR 2025-00037.
Any questions, comments, or desire to call this one up? Mark.
Question. What is the process for referring the design of this project to the advisory board?
So planning staff can tell me if I get it wrong, but this is the final approval of this project. So if we do not call this one up, it will be finally approved and there would not be a referral opportunity. Yep. Anything else or a desire to call it up? Or?
I would desire to call it up simply for that referral. I found the depictions of the buildings to be basically slab-sided buildings again, and I think we'd like to avoid that kind of structure when we can. And getting some input from DAB would I think, assist in that process.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
I would then therefore move that we call up the project known as 1100 28th Street and 2895 East College Avenue, specifically for the purpose of making a referral to the Design Advisory Board.
Yeah, and actually I'd like to hear from Brad here.
Yeah, Good evening, Council. Brad Mueller, Planning and Development Services Department. I did want to point out we did, after concept plan, go to the Design Advisory Board. So they have given their input at one point here.
And the final, and the depictions that were presented in the materials represent
the subsequent?
The subsequent?
Yes, Shannon Muller's available as well. She's the case planner and can speak to that a little bit more.
But the answer is that DAB has already reviewed it, and the final plans reflect their input. Mm-hmm. And Matt, did you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, I was just to add that DAB also had unanimous approval on that concept.
Then I'll withdraw that motion.
Okay, motion withdrawn. Then we will move to item D, please.
Yes, sir. 5D is the consideration of a landmark alteration certificate to demolish an existing accessory building and construct a new 500 square foot accessory building at 432 Concord Avenue, referenced under HIS 2026-00035, a non-contributing property in the Mapleton Hill Historic District.
Any questions, comments, or desire to call this one up? Seeing none, we will move on. We're done with our call-up check-ins. And, oh yes, Nicole.
It is Holy Week, and there is a service that I would like to observe at 7, so I am going to step out for about 45 minutes or so, and will then return. But apologies for missing the public hearing. Thank you to staff for all the work. I think it's a wonderful ordinance, and look forward to listening to all your discussion later. Thank you.
Thanks for letting us know, Nicole, and we'll see you back here in a little while. Okay, let's go to our public hearing, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. A public hearing is item number 6 on tonight's agenda. 6A is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt Ordinance 8743, amending sections 10-3-19, short-term rentals, permitting tenants to apply for festival lodging rental licenses, and 4-20-18, rental license fee. This is reference to the BRC 1981 by adding an associated fee and setting forth related details.
Thanks so much. If you'll recall, when we last brought the original festival license to council, you had indicated an interest in making sure that everyone in our community could benefit from potential opportunities that the festival provides, and particularly our tenant rental community. We had been thinking similarly and knew that we were working on it, and today marks that moment in which we bring you short-term festival lodging rental ordinance for your consideration.
Good evening again, Council. So Brad Mueller, Planning and Development Services Director. So just to add to Nuria's comment, this is really a progression of different things that we're bringing forward in steadily preparing the city organization and the community for Sundance. We're excited to follow up on the direction and interest from the fall. And Tanya will introduce herself, of course, but Tanya's the first time presenting to you all, so I know you'll be kind. Thank you for allowing us to speak to this tonight.
Welcome, Tanya. It's good to have you here. We're usually nice to first-timers, so.
Then that was the right segue into it, so thank you all. Yes, so I'm Tanya Pringle. I'm a Senior Project Manager in Planning and Development Services, and I'm leading some of our work around our updates to our rental licensing code to allow for more festival lodging rental licenses to be approved. So, as you probably remember, and everybody here has already mentioned, so this is kind of a follow-up from our first round of festival lodging rental licenses that we approved in October. And so from that October approval, those have already been fully implemented in December. And at that time, council asked for us to expand this to include more options for all residents within the city, including tenants specifically. The goals for the expanded program, as we're looking at it, are to expand it to include properties that currently hold a long-term license so that more residents can participate. We want to include both tenants and vacant units with that. So that would allow for property owners and tenants alike to participate with the expansion. That also allows for us to balance that additional lodging while retaining our long-term rentals, which was a desire to keep that inventory in stock. And it increases the options of lodging opportunities available to festival attendees and the workers coming here, because there will be more types of properties available for rent. Some of the key features that we kept with this update include it's a new tier for our festival lodging rental as it exists today, so we're expanding upon that. It'll include properties with a long-term rental license, so we've found opportunities for them to participate. This will be a new license with a 1-year term and a $75 fee, so a lower fee and a lower term, which pretty much aligns with the majority of leases out there, and that's why that felt equitable. Tenants would be allowed to participate with owner consent, so we're still going to listen to the property owners and make sure they have consent to allow their tenants to do it. And then owners would also be able to participate with units that they have vacancies in without surrendering their long-term rental license, which was a component that arose from the first round of our. Okay, so other key considerations that we kept in mind when we worked through these updates. We wanted to promote equity for all residents, so there's a desire to allow both tenants and owners to participate in this, and we think we've reached that. And then utilizing our existing regulatory foundation, so this will allow us to streamline our processes on how we implement the program. And we're streamlining the changes to allow for a smooth implementation within our current processes, so we're not going to have to reinvent the wheel, I guess you would say. This will expand the eligibility, which means that more residents can benefit from it. That includes short-term rental tax for the city, as well as residents benefiting from being able to offer their home. So they'll get to join in the financial impact that it can bring. And then it maintains our long-term rental stock. So we have safeguards built into our long-term rental license program, which includes safety inspections and our eviction prevention services. So this will keep those long-term rental properties licensed and allow for an extension along that, with that in conjunction with it. So those are the key points for this update. We're open for questions, but we have a recommendation of approval. If the ordinance is approved tonight, we're prepared to begin accepting applications tomorrow, and then we would be able to issue licenses beginning May 4th.
Thanks so much. That was a brilliantly efficient presentation.
Thank you.
Any clarifying questions? Tina?
Yeah, thank you for all that. I am wondering if when a landlord decides that they're going to allow tenants to rent their units, do they generally communicate what their conditions are, whether it's a revenue share percentage or it's a deposit requirement or additional deposit requirement? Is that communicated in advance with the renter who's going to rent it, sub-rent it-ish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that agreement would be between the property owner and their tenant through the conditions of their lease. So the only piece that we would be regulating is getting that attestation or approval from the property owner that they're allowing it. But we currently don't monitor leases in our long-term rental program or in our short-term. We don't watch for those lease terms, so it would be handled in that same path.
And then is there any requirement that if you're in a building with multiple units, that you need to extend the same revenue share and other conditions to the tenants equally, or could there be differentiation between your tenants?
That, again, would be handled through your lease agreement, the same as every individual signs their own lease agreement. So if you chose as a property owner to use a standard lease agreement for everyone, then I guess you would be following that. But you would have the opportunity to have an individual lease agreement per tenant.
And then if there's a dispute between the tenant and the landlord, where would they go?
Part of our housing mediation and eviction prevention, that was the piece where I had highlighted that the long-term rental license would stay in effect with the way this program is designed. so that those services are already available and running for everyone. So we have mediation between landlords and tenants, between roommates. Our mediation services are already active, as well as eviction prevention.
And would we track those so that we would understand if there is any kind of issue happening around this license?
Housing and Human Services can typically give us those volumes already, so they would be able to watch for an influx of requests for assistance.
Okay, and then if the tenant and the landlord choose, can the landlord be in charge of doing the short-term license? Can they assume the whole process if the tenant still wants to leave and they both want to revenue share, but can the landlord be in charge of the process?
Yes, so the way we have set up for process is that the landlord, the property management company, or the tenant can apply for that festival license within the unit as long as it's allowed in the building. So whoever applies for that festival license is the one who would be taking the responsibility of filing their sales tax and maintaining the license. But the tenant or the property owner could do that, yes.
All right, that's great. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Mark?
Yeah, I want to go back to my colleague's point on the splits of revenue between landlord and tenant. We want landlords and tenants to participate in this because we need the rooms for visitors from Sundance. And so my concern is that, if the landlord says, I want 90%, the tenant will say, I'm not going to bother. If the tenant says, I want 90%, the landlord's going to say, don't bother. And I guess I'm raising the issue of whether we ought to set boundaries on those revenue splits so everybody knows what the rules of the road are, and it's a reasonable allocation in terms of maximums and minimums, so that people will want to do this.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So thank you for the question. We certainly appreciate and understand the questions of how that gets split and what kind of motivations or demotivations that creates. As government, we can't control those private contracts or lease agreements, but there is equally, if not more important in this whole effort towards success will be the private sector and our partners at Visit Boulder and Barha and others in the community really promoting this and creating a platform that's easy for people to use and standardizing some of the expectations. And so it would be our hope that the market would help control that and recognizing that there would be other people enter into those agreements if a particular property owner wasn't being particularly fair or aggressive in doing that. But as government, we wouldn't be able to have a role in that regard. But we are working closely with those community partners.
All right, I'm just hoping we can get enough people interested and being cooperative with one another in order to make this happen. If we only get 100 rooms out of this, it's hardly worth the candle. And the object is to get many rooms and to really augment what we can provide in terms of vacant houses and hotel rooms, and really bolster that with this. But I accept the representation that we're going to let the market decide.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Councilmember Welk, that the program for owners applications, which started in the fall, currently has about 250 licenses in, and that's without a lot of aggressive promotion at this point. So we're optimistic, and we all want the same thing. We want success.
Well, promote aggressively.
We'll get there. Ryan.
Thank you. Just a few questions. One, to follow up on Mark's comment, just make sure I got this right. So there's, with the current proposal, there's no rule about the revenue split. It could be 99-100, 99-1 or 199. That's it. There's no regulation.
Right. We're not regulating the split income at all.
Okay, great. And then I'm generally in favor of this, but just to make sure I understand some of the dynamics, I'm trying to remember how the chronic nuisance ordinance works, but is there, can you imagine a scenario where things get confusing with a chronic nuisance and who I forgot who actually gets assessed a chronic nuisance violation, but can you just discuss chronic nuisance in this context?
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Um, So to the degree that there were any violations, people advertising without license being listed, because just like all of our other licensing programs, any advertising for a festival lodging license permit would require it to be located in the advertisement. So if there was a violation of advertising without that, not having a license, abusing a license, those kind of things, that represents a violation, a nuisance violation, if you will. The chronic nuisance is really designed to acknowledge properties where there's habitual violations of numerous sites, so it would fall into that category, but not unique in that regard.
Okay, and it's the owner, the landlord, that's assessed a chronic nuisance violation. Okay, so yeah, I suppose I'm just thinking through if there's a consideration to be made about if this would take multiple years, but not necessarily, that you could get into a chronic nuisance situation with the festival subleaser, and there could be a conflict somehow with who approved that. But I guess it would be the owner would have approved the whole thing anyway, so maybe it's all moot. Is it all moot?
I think so, as you've described it. So yeah, I'll just leave it there.
It's all moot. Okay, thanks. And then I think the final thing is I very much like that this creates more economic options for renters. And we do give renters some assistance and guidance through the city, partly in terms of our renter handbook. I'm just wondering if staff have contemplated any new types of guidance that we should think about or intend to think about to just help to advocate for their rights and interests. For example, things like if there's damage. So right now a renter would typically pay a security deposit, and but in this case, if there's a sublease or subrenter, if there was a damage that occurred during that term, I suppose there could be a question that comes later down the road about who, if you're not assessing a new security deposit for the subleaser, who's responsible. Again, I realize this is an agreement that will be made up between the parties, but it does make me think that under the idea that we're trying to provide options and opportunities for renters, this might be something we help with guidance on. But I guess, so sorry for the long-winded example, but I'm just thinking about the idea of giving guidance to renters to help them protect their interests. Have you thought about that?
Yes, we have considered it. I have spoken with our mediation group, which if we need to move through that group, that process, we're able to have them help us put those together. That's who actually writes and handles the landlord-tenant handbook. But on top of that, our co-facilitators, I guess, our partners with Barha have been very willing to help draft some of those resources and share them as well. So we have community interest in making the resources comprehensive enough that they can fit for all the dynamics and all the markets wanting to participate. And I'm confident between the resources that they're crafting and our own internal departments, we can offer some guidance with that. We already have our Boulder model lease and the landlord-tenant handbook, so we can add some more resources with that.
Okay, super. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yeah, we got Matt.
So I was fine. I think it was maybe Mark's inquiry got me sparking this. So maybe it's answered. So I didn't look for it specifically. I was trying to get it, but nonetheless, there's a question there. So if it's been answered, great. If not, we're good. Is there a window of or a not statute of limitation, but is there a window in which you can't, prior to a festival, you can no longer apply because it's just too late? And could you apply the day of the festival and try to do that? And is that, and is that the case, and is that reasonable on staff. And so is there a desire or want to think about backing that up a little bit to say, just for the sake of staff capacity and all of that, 10 days prior, we're shut down? I'm just sort of curious, because I don't want that tsunami to show up at the very end and then staff's in this crazy burden.
I think, so to your question, there is no window. This is an ongoing, permanent, additional product, festival license that we are offering with all of our different rental licenses. So we'll be offering it year round. The window that exists is that you can only offer it for rent during those special festival events. You can apply for it at any time. The idea is we want them to apply sooner, because if they applied now, next January is in that window of a year that their license is good for, and they already know the dates for Sundance, so they would be able to go ahead and prepare their place and get it listed and offer it. They'll be eligible for renewal, so if you don't move, if you're a tenant who stays put and you're a long-term tenant, you can continue to renew your license, and then you would be able to possibly even build, consistent attendees that come back and book with you again and again. I do think the team that processes these applications is already well versed in setting expectations as applications come in. So if you were to apply the day before the festival, it's unlikely you could get it listed and rented and offered in the marketplace soon enough. So I think it's going to level itself out in that sense. But in general, our processing times hold pretty steady to within 2 weeks. So even if you applied in December and thought you could get it listed and maybe get those last minute attendees, it's possible. But we're intending to leave it open year round.
I'll just add too, if I may, that this is the power of leveraging our partners. And so our partners, particularly those that visit Boulder, will be actively marketing what this looks like, because we too do not want that tsunami of applications all in the last week of December. That does not help any of us. And moreover, there is great demand. And so the market, I think, will play itself out pretty quickly, but our partners will be actively encouraging anyone who's interested to apply early, so that everyone can take opportunities. The reality is, for any festival, any place that you have gone to for an event, places fill up quickly. So doing so earlier is to the benefit of us all.
Fair, and maybe not for this, but flag it, because we'll probably have iterations of this going forward. This is probably not a one and done. Just flag maybe a throttled fee, where maybe if within a certain period of time of a festival, that fee is double, right? Like any sort of registration for an event, you want to incentivize early adoption. And so having a lower fee for like early registration may incentivize that. Late registration comes at a premium. And so anyway, just flag that, maybe not for now, but maybe for a next iteration.
We can do that. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, not seeing any other hand. Oh, Taisha, there you are.
I just had a question, builds off of Tina's earlier question about just reporting and reporting frequency. And I was wondering, in the application process, if we're collecting and requiring them to report on what the split is, if there's transparency in that, in order to get the fee. And if not, why was that considered? And if it was considered, why was it rejected? As the only renter here and hearing from a lot of renting people, I have significant concerns about not having any kind of standards on what the split could be, and I can see some abuses happening there. Oftentimes I feel like renters were seen as like, we come and go. I've been living here for 13 years. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in investing in other people's land, and I can just see there being some tomfoolery here. So I would feel much better if there were some kind of reporting or mechanism where we can capture and just ensure that we are building trust through this process. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
That was a question.
A question, yeah.
Did you consider gathering this information? Is there a legal issue? Oh, I see a legal.
Yeah, I think Teresa can speak to that point. We did not collect that information, but cannot, so.
So I just want to make sure people have a chance to answer. Teresa, did you want to
Sure.
address the question?
So if I'm understanding the question, council member, it's could there be a requirement to report data about?
That is my question. Oftentimes, for example, when you get something, you often have to report on it. And so I was requesting, is that something that we can ask? And I understand there might be proprietary or legal requirements, so maybe it's not necessarily something that gets reported out. I think of coming from the education space, right? We don't necessarily would give any kind of information that would allow you to identify a student. However, you would get information at the aggregate or just different grain sizes. Thank you.
Yeah, so there would not be a legal prohibition upon collecting such data. It would be an additional step for staff and to analyze that data. But it certainly could be collected.
We did. It wasn't part of our. No. Okay. Yeah. It sounds like there was some question around that, but it was not considered as part of the ordinance drafting at this point. Yeah.
All right. Taisha, does that cover it?
Yes, the rest will be in comments.
Okay. Not seeing any other questions, we'll go to the public hearing. We have 4 people signed up to speak. Everyone will get 3 minutes to speak, and you will need to speak to the ordinance in front of us regarding short-term rental licenses. Our first 3 speakers are Lynn Siegel and Cody Ramo in person, and Laura Gonzalez virtually.
Mayor, I do not see Lynn online.
She's here in person. She's just come down to the podium.
Lynn Siegel. Yeah, I don't support Sundance at all coming to this town, so I don't want any benefit for housing situation. And believe me, I've had up to 17 people in my house at one time illegally in the past through Airbnb. And yet I didn't support the occupancy limits thing, and I don't want more population brought to Boulder. We can't handle it. We can't even fund our South Boulder Rec Center. You know, we cannot handle this. I don't want anything to do with Sundance, much as I like that they're a great opportunity, and people up at CU at the archaeology at Natural Hazards told me they're doing a great film that, you know, like, I know that has a lot of vitality. There's an echo here. It's really tough. But I don't support this vacation rental thing because people are going to be leaving their houses, then they have to go somewhere, and then they have to pay somewhere else. And I don't go anywhere because I live in Boulder, and I can't afford a cup of coffee for 40 years. Everything is for my geothermal heat pump, which is Nuria knows about because I've been two and a half years waiting to find out with the city and the county where I am because they did an energy retrofit. Like, everything is for my kids, for geothermal, for
If you
climate
could speak
change.
to the short-term rental, please.
Yeah, and that is related to short-term rental because it's bringing too many people and too much stress to the population for people, average people living here. It's not going to improve things. It'll make more homelessness, more wealth divide, all of that with Sundance. And supporting this this accelerant to people to be able to house them, it only contributes to it. That's why I can't. It's such a big deal. It's like CU South, too much growth. CU is great, but not too much. And it's like the airport, which we heard tonight, they can have
Last warning on addressing
and that's
short-term
related
rentals.
to this. It's related to Sundance. Everything is related to Sundance because it's money, and it's bringing more people. 85,000 people here in 2 weeks. It's just not. I won't say sustainable, because
I don't want to sustain a bad thing, and we've already got a bad thing. Everybody in the state of Colorado, everyone wants to come here, and we have drought things now that we have to, I turn on my water and wait just for the heat to come, and it's not very hot because of my retrofit. So, and I'm at 40 degrees in
Your
the
time's up,
shower.
but
So,
thank you for your testimony.
anyway, thanks. Thanks for your.
Okay, our other three speakers are Cody Ramo, Laura Gonzalez, and Jill Grano.
Okay, let's see if I can not create an echo. Good evening. I'm Cody Ramo, the president of Barha, as well as a managing partner of Sunnyside Property Management. Respectively, we represent about 16,000 units here in Boulder and the general Boulder area. What we wanted to say is that we really do appreciate that you're bringing this ordinance forward and that we are in support of expanding the housing opportunities during the Sundance Film Festival. Our goal is to support the city and help Sundance by providing the opportunity for as many owners to participate in the program as possible. With this in mind, Barha requests that the city give the long-term rental license holders a choice in how they participate. If a property owner or landlord chooses to turn their property on to participate in the program, they should be able to, one, either opt into both vacant units and tenant subleasing, or opt into simply allowing their vacant units without allowing the tenants to sublease. From what we understand, the current proposal does not allow for the vacant unit only option. This request is just a process change and should not require a change to the proposed ordinance. Of course, nobody really knows how many owners are going to participate, but we do know from our member feedback that some owners simply won't opt in if they have to, if they're required to include both tenant subleasing and vacant units. I am one of those landlords. I very much see that the vacant unit only option is a good, viable way to allow landlords that are skeptical of allowing subleasing to dip their toes in, get their feet wet, see that it's not going to be a terrible idea, which may in the next year allow them to actually continue and allow the residents to do their own. On top of that, of course, yeah, if in that case, then the units won't be available at all. So without the vacant only option, there's a good chance that we're leaving potential units on the table. This is particularly important because of our vacancy rate right now is very high. We're currently seeing an overall vacancy rate of about 9% here in the Boulder area. Our intent is not to take anything away from the subleasing, but to add more potential units to the supply. We see ourselves at Barha as a partner with the city, and in this, we are also working to market this to our members, trying to help them figure out how they can do it. So whether you adopt this portion that we want or not, we are also still here to help. Let's see. Best practices. Even with the added choice, this ordinance will still open up a lot of opportunity for the tenants that they otherwise would not have. And at the end of the day, we're simply asking for added flexibility. Therefore, I'm asking council to direct staff to give us the additional option. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we'll go to Laura Gonzalez online and then Jill Grano in person.
Mayor, I do not see Laura online tonight.
Okay, thanks. Our last speaker is Jill Grano.
Hey, Mayor and Council, thank you so much for moving this forward. And I want to thank staff. They've just been incredible. Tanya and I have been on tour together in recent days. You all know me, but today I'm speaking to you as the statewide director of housing for Sundance Festival relocation with the governor's office. And we very much support this measure. We would encourage you to pass the measure as is. There is an important equity component in allowing tenants to sublease should the owner allow, and not just making this opportunity only for owners for their vacant spaces. Additionally, vacant spaces won't come up until very late because folks won't know which spaces are vacant until right before. So there's not a lot of value add in that. So we would encourage you to pass it as is. We are also so grateful to BARA for their support. They've been invaluable partners and will continue to work together on this. And have been very aggressively promoting it, but that's okay. And we're here for any questions. I do want to just note a couple of things that you guys have brought up. So Airbnb already has an apartment-friendly program. They do track the splits, and on their program, we're partnering closely with them because they've got this so dialed. So just so you guys know, cities around the country already allow for tenants to short-term rent. Right here in Denver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, all over. So we're not inventing anything new here. If they're using Airbnb as a platform, the split per building is the same. Airbnb does not allow for one unit is one price, one is another. I do anticipate most will be on Airbnb. Of course, they could find some other platform to do this, but Airbnb provides insurance for both the tenant and the landlord. They provide tax remittance. They deal with the split. So we'll have tracking with them. And the common number of the split, based on information we have from throughout the country, is between 10 to 25% for the landlord. We're not seeing landlords charge beyond that typically. We hope that Boulder landlords, are the same here. We'll obviously see. I'm here for questions for a few more minutes if you have any.
Thanks very much. All right, that brings us to the close of the public hearing, and we'll bring it back to council for discussion and perhaps a motion before too long. Who would like to get us started? Mark, you look inquisitive.
Well, can I get started with a motion?
You certainly can.
Well, I'm going to move that we amend and pass on second reading Ordinance 8475, amending sections 10-3-19, short-term rentals, permitting tenants to apply for festival lodging rental licenses, and 40-20-18, rental license fee, BRC 1981, by adding an associated fee and setting forth related details.
Great. Could I just ask the beginning of that to read that you move that we adopt on second reading?
I move that we adopt on second reading.
Thanks so much. Is there a second?
Second.
Mark, would you like to speak to your motion?
I think most of what needs to be said has been said. I think this will be very beneficial to the community. It will help our ability to host the film festival, and I congratulate staff on the work that they've done to put this together. So.
Very good. Matt, do you want to speak to your second?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just say it speaks to how nimble staff's been on this. I remember when we first did this, we recognized that there was a gap, which is being addressed here really quickly. So a testament to how quickly we saw an issue, we addressed it, and here we are on second reading, about to get it done. And knowing that this is not going to be perfect and a one-shot thing, we'll come back, tweak, modify, but maintaining that agility will be key, and we set precedent that we can do so. So this is nice work.
Very good. Other comments before we go to a vote? Taisha?
I do. I just wanted to lift up Barha's request and for consideration around the vacant only option for multi-unit property owners. I do like that idea as a pathway. My concern as a renter is that we hear that this is passed and we're so excited, but then when we apply, it could still be denied by the homeowner. And so if those landowners know that they're not going to do a sublease, but they would be open to addressing vacancies, and although I appreciate and honor Jill's expertise on these matters, we do know that the percentage is quite high right now. There are vacancies right now, and they can be making decisions right now, but they may not be as comfortable to do the sublease agreement. And although I appreciate, again, the comments around Airbnb, I also have problems with the idea of having a private entity be responsible for collecting data and reporting. I do believe it should be our city responsibility to collect that kind of data and make sure that we are being consistent and not relying on a particular company that could then be prioritized, or any kind of slight there. And then just as far as reporting, I can't, in the 13 years I've been renting here, recall an email about from the city about renting. I didn't know there was a handbook. I didn't know there was the renter mediation. And so although I appreciate having resources, if we don't know about it, if it's not being pushed to us, they might as well not exist. So I just really want to lift that up as a concern around that. Again, I know that we're not going to get it right out of the gate on the first try. It's my understanding there will be opportunities for us to make adjustments. But again, my concern is the way as written, we may not have the data to be able to make the adjustments in the timeframes that we would need to be able to make them. Thank you.
Thanks. Ryan?
Yeah, I do like the policy and appreciate staff and all the great work here. I want to acknowledge I think the Barha idea has some merit to give the property owner or the landlord some more just discretion with what kind of property partnership they engage in. But I think the way that the proposal is structured is it gives so much discretion to the property owner to set the terms that I think they de facto have quite a bit of power in this anyway. So I think that those concerns are, I think, assuaged at least for this first ordinance, and we see how it goes. I would though. I just go back to I'm kind of interested in what Taisha said, and just thinking about the keeping our renters protected. And I think what we are producing now is a framework that takes the role of the renter and the landlord beyond one of a tenant and a landlord to being business partners in a commercial enterprise. And I am concerned that if things don't go well in that partnership, that there is probably a structural bias towards the landlord. I just think that's sort of the way it works. So I'm concerned about liability issues that there's a dispute, and we just hope that we can really provide guidance and support to renters that want to engage in this, because I do think it really is an exciting program, but it's just a fundamentally different kind of a relationship between the renter and the landlord. And just want to make sure we're there for that and watching for it. So thank you, staff. This is really great.
Thanks. Tina?
Yeah, I just want to concur with Ryan a little bit on this idea of when we change this relationship, but the landlord is able to call the terms for this short-term rental license, and they can structure the terms in a way that a tenant wouldn't really want to do it, so they can still turn on all the units, but then set the terms so it's not favorable to the tenant, but they can then rent the vacant units. I definitely agree the city should not get involved in setting terms or any of that. But I do hope that if we find that that there's not collaboration, or if, how can we think about this and encourage that collaboration and creating those opportunities? So, yeah, that's it.
Great. Tara?
I just like it just as it is, and I hope we can improve it just as it is and then see how it goes.
Nice and pithy. I'll go ahead and call on myself and just echo the thanks to staff. This has been a very rapid turnaround, and really appreciate how quickly you brought this forward. So thanks to that. Thanks for that. And thanks to Jill for your work on helping to make this happen and all the work you're doing around housing for Sundance. Also want to thank the constructive engagement from the Barha folks. Thanks for being here tonight and for how you're working on this. And I know this is going to be a good partnership going forward. I hear your request about the vacant only. I do have a couple concerns around that. One would be that it might potentially limit the amount of units because the renters wouldn't be able to sublease, so that's a lot fewer units that are available. But I also want to make sure that the renters themselves are able to share in the potential financial bounty of these short-term rentals. So because of those two reasons, I'm not going to advocate for making that change, but I appreciate you coming and talking to us about that. That's what I got. Anything else before we go to a vote? Sina and Taisha, do you want me to straw poll the vacant only?
No, I just want to be able to track that information, and I think we'll be able to get some of that information on the, the first go round. But and also to see if we want to make adjustments again, depending on what the demand is and where we're looking what we're looking at.
Sounds good. Great, thanks. In that case, we have a motion and a second on the table. If we could have a roll call vote, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir, thank you. We'll start the roll call for the adoption of Ordinance 8743 with Councilmember Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Shuhart.
Yes.
Spear. Wallach.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Weiner.
Yes.
And Councilmember Adams.
Yes.
Ordinance 8743 is hereby adopted with a vote of 8-0.
Fantastic. Staff, thanks again for your work. Thanks everyone for making this happen, and looking forward to seeing folks be able to rent their folks places for the Sundance Film Festival. And with that, if we can move to our final item, please.
Yes, sir. Our last item on tonight's agenda is item number 7, matters from the city manager. 7A is exploring our new authority to modify the tip offset. This is related to policy options.
Thanks so much, Mayor and Council. Our next item responds directly to a council priority set in this year's retreat. You had wanted to explore what your authority is to modify tip offsets as per law, and we have staff ready to talk a little bit about what they have discovered and what possible options, to get your direction as we move forward. So with that, I will send it off to Assistant City Manager Mark Wolf.
Thank you, Nuria. Good evening, Council. Mark Wolf, Assistant City Manager, joined up here this evening by Megan Wilson-Outcall, who is serving as our project manager for this project. At City Council's retreat in January, exploring our local authority to modify the tip credit was established as one of Council's priorities. I thought it would be helpful to clarify here at the outset what we hope to accomplish this evening. First, to be clear, City Council is not making any final decisions tonight. What we do hope to accomplish is some degree of narrowing of potential options related to the tip credit, also known as the tip offset. Staff also hopes to get as much clarity as possible on the scope of the process and timeline for decision making. Based on the original scope of this council priority, the current tentative date for a public hearing and final action is June 18th, which has implications for the type of analysis and engagement we would conduct. I want to acknowledge that Council did ask us to begin the exploration of this topic on a timeline that could accommodate some type of implementation at the beginning of 2027. As such, the scope of our data analysis and proposed engagement reflects that condensed timeline. I do want to note that since we have tried to provide this information to you quickly, we are still finalizing year-end data from 2025 that was used to inform some of the information. Based on new information that we actually received today, we do have a couple of corrections this evening, which Megan will note. I ask for your grace while we try and provide you with the most accurate information that we have. Additionally, we have received many great questions from a few of you related to labor and business information, economic trends, and other information that could help support decision making. We have tried to be open and reasonable about what is possible on the current timeline, what we might be able to do this year, and what might be a longer term item, both in our hotline responses, and we'll also try to clarify that this evening. So we appreciate your partnership to help refine how we are engaging with community on this topic to set clear expectations going forward. We'll start this evening with some basic information. What the heck is tip offset? How does it relate to minimum wage, et cetera, which I think Megan sets up really nicely in this presentation. She'll then take us through a few of our potential policy options, including the potential financial impact for both businesses and workers. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Megan.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Council. Is it on? Yeah, you just gotta get really close. Oh, okay, thank you. I'm Megan Wilson-Elkalt. I'm the Water Quality Senior Manager for Utilities, and I'm excited to have this opportunity to support the City Manager's Office on the TIP Offset project. I also want to thank our project team, many of whom are in the audience. Includes Mark, of course, Heather Stoffer, Megan Finelli, Elliot Labanti, Kirsten Westerland, and Shannon Oliva. So tonight, as Mark mentioned, I'm going to provide just some basics on the tip offset and what our new local authority is. I'll provide some national, regional, and local context for the discussion, go through our conceptual options, and then briefly describe what we found looking at past community engagement, the results of our equity analysis, and plans for engagement moving forward. Before I begin, I'll present the questions for you so that you have those in mind throughout the presentation. Do you have any questions or feedback about the data and information presented? Which of the options would you like us to explore further, and are there any that can be taken off the table? And do you support the proposed timeline and engagement approach? Okay, so first going over the background of what the tip offset is. This graphic shows the City of Boulder's minimum wage, tip offset, and base wage for tipped employees in 2026. The tip offset, sometimes referred to as the tip credit, is the amount employers of certain tipped workers can subtract from the minimum wage to set a new base wage for tipped employees. More simply, the base wage for tipped employees is the minimum wage minus the tip offset. The base wage is paid directly to the employee in their paycheck, and their tips should bring them up to at least the minimum wage. Employers cannot pay less than the base wage, regardless of how much an employee earns in tips. And the tip offset in Colorado is $3.02, and it doesn't change over time unless an eligible jurisdiction changes that amount. There are several rules that apply to the tip offset. Two that I'll highlight here are that all employees, including those who earn tips, must earn at least the minimum wage. So if their base wage plus tips don't equal minimum wage, their employer is required to make up that difference in their paycheck, and that's supposed to happen on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis. In Boulder, the tips offset only applies to food and beverage service establishments, and I'll refer to these as restaurants throughout the presentation for brevity, but includes breweries, cafes, coffee shops, full-service restaurants, etc. Last year, the Colorado General Assembly passed a law that allows some local governments to modify the tip offset. A local government is eligible if its minimum wage is higher than the state's minimum wage. So going back to our graphic, I'll illustrate what this looks like in 2026 dollars, recognizing that council isn't considering an increase to the tip offset this year, but I'll just use this year as an illustration. So what the new authority does is essentially set a new floor for the base wage for tipped employees. So this year, the tip offset could increase by $1.66. It can't increase more than that, such that the base wage for the base wage for tipped employees goes below that Colorado base wage for tipped employees. So this year, that would equate to a maximum of $4.68 for the tip offset. And so this difference between what the tip offset is today and what it could be is really the focus of our conversation tonight. And the team and I want to recognize that while increasing the tip offset would impact restaurants and employees, it wouldn't address all of the challenges that the restaurant industry or employees may be facing, such as cost of living, cost of doing business, inflation, and so forth. With that background, I'll go over some of the information and data that we found over the past couple months. We've pulled together what we could in a condensed time frame, and there is some more detail in the memo. We gathered information from national and state data sets. We reviewed news articles, academic papers, and nonprofit policy papers. And we reviewed available reports for Colorado and the region about the restaurant industry, some of which was in the 2026 Colorado Business Economic Outlook, which is put out by the Leeds School of Business at CU Boulder. And we also looked at a report on Denver restaurants that was recently published and prepared by members of the restaurant industry on behalf of the City of Denver and Visit Denver. So first we'll look at what's going on across the country with the tip offset. The base wage for tipped employees varies widely by state. The lowest base wage for tipped employees in the country at the federal level is $2.13, and there are quite a number of states that adhere to that base wage for tipped employees. So the lighter the color on this map, the lower the base wage, the darker the color, the higher the base wage. There are some states that have outlawed the tip offset altogether, and all tipped employees are required to earn the minimum wage. Currently, Colorado sits at about the 9th highest for base wage for tipped employees. Regionally, there are 4 jurisdictions in Colorado that have adopted a higher minimum wage than the states and are therefore eligible to increase the tip offset. We've checked in with these other communities as well as peer cities in Boulder County. Boulder County is not currently considering an increase to the tip offset. We believe the city and county of Denver will, but they haven't formalized plans to do so. The city of Edgewater passed an ordinance last year that kept the base wage for tipped employees the same in 2026 as it was in 2025, and so they increased the tip offset. That ordinance sunsets this year, and we understand that the city of Edgewater will take up this issue again later this year and decide whether to pass another ordinance into the future. Peer communities in Boulder County are not currently exploring an increase to the minimum wage, and so they are not eligible to modify the tip offset. What we found in Colorado and in our region is that restaurants are experiencing slower sales. They've seen an increase in costs, their cost of doing business across the board, as well as an increase in regulatory requirements. Here in Boulder, we know that commercial rents are high compared to most Denver neighborhoods. There has been an increase in labor costs over the past several years, so minimum wage has increased by 40% over the last 6 years, and base wage for tipped employees has increased by 55%. Restaurants brought in, I should have corrected this, so this is the first correction. Restaurants brought in about $19 million in sales tax revenue in 2025. And so we've seen slowing sales tax revenue in 2024 and 2025, and I kind of grayed out the tail end of this graph as we make sure that those numbers are correct. So this was reported inaccurately in the memo. As Mark said, we just got updated numbers today. So we believe there was a slight increase in sales tax revenue in 2025. In Boulder, there are about 10,500 employees in the city that work in restaurants. That represents almost 10% of city jobs. And this was also corrected from the memo. We didn't include all of the occupations that we should have in the first go around. We know that people of color and women are overrepresented in the restaurant industry compared to the general population. We have that data for Boulder County. It wasn't available for the city. Restaurant employees are generally some of the lowest paid workers compared to other industries. We also found that tipped workers have a greater wage range than non-tipped employees in the restaurant industry. However, we found that the median wage for wait staff and bartenders was about $20 per hour in 2024 in Boulder County, which is about $5 higher than the minimum wage. All right, with that background, I'm going to go into our conceptual options. I want to first remind everyone that the City of Boulder minimum wage will increase by 8% next year, and then after that by the rate of inflation. So that we could illustrate the impacts of an increase in tip offset, we estimated inflation to be about 3%. We also assumed that a tipped employee works 40 hours per week, and we assumed a restaurant employs 10 full-time tipped employees. So we know that not all tipped employees work full-time, and restaurants may employ various numbers of people, but for the purposes of illustration, that's what we assumed. For each option, I'm going to show 2 slides. The first slide shows what the tip offset change will look like over time. The top red line is the minimum wage. The green line is the base wage for tipped employees. The dotted line is the maximum tip offset allowed, and that bottom gold line is the tip offset. So for each option, the base wage for tipped employees and the tip offset will change. The minimum wage and the dotted line will stay the same. I'll also show what the impact is from 2026 to 2027 for each option. I'll show both the hourly increase for tip offset and base wage, and then what the increase would be for the total year in 2027, again, using those assumptions of an employee who works full-time in a restaurant that employs 10 full-time tipped workers. Our first option is the status quo, so it retains the $3.02 tip offset over time. You can see that bottom line stays the same. The base wage for tipped employees increases year over year, and it will always just be the minimum wage minus $3.02. So for 2027, that would mean a $1.35 hourly increase in the base wage for tipped employees, or about 10%. For a full year, that would be about $2,800 for someone working full-time. The tip offset wouldn't increase, so there's no additional savings to the restaurant. For a restaurant that has 10 tipped staff, they save about $68,000 a year with the $3.02 tip offset. Our second option is a moderate increase to the tip offset. And for this, we set the base wage increasing at the same rate as minimum wage. So you can see the tip offset line increases a little bit year over year. The base wage for tipped employees would increase by 8% in 2027, just like minimum wage. And then after that, the base wage would increase by CPI. In 2027, that would be a $1.10 hourly increase in the base wage for tipped employees, which equates to about $2,300 for the year. The tip offset would increase by 25 cents, which equates to about $5,100 in additional savings, again, assuming that example restaurant with 10 tipped workers. For the next option, we set the tip offset slightly higher. And for this, we simply set the tip offset equaling the 20% of the minimum wage year over year. So you can see that bottom line, the tip offset increases slightly more than in the previous example. The base wage for tipped employees still goes up, but at a slightly lower amount than the previous example. In 2027, that equates to a 74-cent hourly increase for the base wage for tipped employees, or about $1,500 for the year. That's about 61 cents increase in the tip offset, which equates to about $12,800 in additional savings for the year. The final option that we developed was maximizing the tip offset. So in this example, we would set the tip offset at the maximum amount allowed by the state statute. And so you can see that tip offset line would increase in 2027 and match the maximum tip offset allowed. In this option, the base wage for tipped employees would decrease in 2027 and then would increase at the rate of inflation after that. So from 2026 to 2027, that's a $1.21 hourly decrease for the base wage for tipped employees, about a 10% reduction, which equates to $2,500 less in 2027 in the base wage. The tip offset would increase by $2.56, equating to about $53,000 in additional savings for the example restaurant. This slide shows the options together, so you can look at those, and I'm happy to pull them up after the presentation as well, if that's helpful. So before we turn to the questions and discussion, I mentioned we looked at past community engagement results, so we looked at the 2024 minimum wage study, and we also looked at the testimony that was provided as part of the state legislation last year to increase the tip offset. What we found in the 2024 minimum wage questionnaire was that a majority of restaurant employees supported raising the minimum wage, and they cited positives such as the ability to pay for necessities and increased opportunities. Some restaurant employees also expressed concerns about inflation and impacts to businesses. The majority of restaurant owners opposed raising the minimum wage in the city, citing concerns such as having to increase their prices for customers, higher inflation overall, impacts to small and local businesses. Some restaurant owners did support raising the minimum wage, citing a desire to have a better living wage for their employees. I'll note that this questionnaire was not a statistically valid survey. We had about 350 total respondents who work in the city, who work or live in the city, and about 50 of those were from the restaurant industry, so a relatively small sample size. We didn't ask specifically about the tip offset, but felt that these results were indicative of kind of the general sentiment around wages. In terms of the state testimony I mentioned, the testimony from labor groups largely opposed increasing the tip offset, while restaurant owners and the restaurant industry largely supported increasing the tip offset. The team performed a racial equity assessment as part of this project, and as I mentioned before, note that people of color and women are generally overrepresented in the restaurant workforce compared to the general population. We looked at who may benefit from increasing the tip offset and concluded that restaurant owners, including small, independent, minority, and women-owned businesses, would likely benefit from an increase to the tip offset. We thought others may benefit as well. Some employees could benefit, including non-tipped staff, if restaurant operators passed their savings on to an increase in wages for back-of-house employees. Customers could benefit if restaurant owners did not have to raise their prices as much. In terms of who may be negatively impacted by increasing the tip offset, tipped employees could be negatively impacted either from a decrease in their base wages or a slower growth in base wage. But this doesn't necessarily contemplate their total wages and what tips will look like in the future. As we consider ways to offset any impacts to equity, just want to note that the 2024 minimum wage ordinance itself was intended to address the cost of living in Boulder and inequities, including racial and gender wage gaps. We understand that the tip offset can be confusing, and there are examples of wage theft. And so through this project, we're looking at ways to enhance education in multiple languages on the rights of employees and where and how to safely file a wage complaint. And we will continue to analyze racial equity as options are narrowed and following community engagement. So next steps for this project include community engagement. Following this discussion and hearing your feedback, we have a tight turnaround with the current project timeline. With that, we'll be at the consult level on our engagement spectrum, which means we will ask for feedback on different options and let the community know how we used that feedback. Our engagement will be primarily centered on a Be Heard Boulder questionnaire for community members to provide feedback on options. We'll also use this opportunity to do some of that education about what the tip offset is and what the rights of employees are. We'll distribute the opportunity to weigh in on this project through our city channels, as well as established partnerships and channels with industry and labor organizations in CU Boulder. Our timeline, again, after this meeting, we will pivot quickly to our community engagement window. We're currently scheduled for a June 18th public hearing and council consideration of the proposed ordinance. And this timeline is based on the goal set at the 2026 council retreat to enact an ordinance in time for the business community and employees to plan for 2027. If adopted, a new tip offset would go into effect in January 2027. So with that, I'll post the questions for council again. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Megan. And let the record show that Councilmember Spear is back on the dais. Welcome back. All right, so clarifying questions for city staff. And if we can keep these limited to information that you need in order to answer the questions given to us tonight, please. Who's got questions? Nicole?
And I apologize if I missed this while I was out, but thank you so much for the presentation. I just wanted to ask a question. I think we received an email shortly before the meeting, and did you already talk about that and the changes there?
I did, but
Okay.
I'm happy to repeat it.
Okay, yeah, but basically, I just want to be sure that I understood it. So the memo had initially said that that restaurant sales tax from restaurants had decreased 4% between 2024 and then 2025. But what we actually found was that sales tax from restaurants increased by 2% during that time period. And the thing that we were looking for was what impact the wage increase had, right? And that and changing on, so it was basically like it changed January 1st, 2025. It increased.
Yes, we aren't making any conclusions about the impact in the increase in minimum wage, if that's what you're asking about. I think it's too early to tell what that impact would be.
Yep, okay, all right, yeah, it just sounded like in the memo it was suggesting that that increase in wages may have led to the decrease in sales tax. So I just wanted to clarify, thank you.
And
Mayor,
if I might.
just a moment.
Yep.
Mayor, if I will, and council members, I just want to apologize. I want to say we're experiencing some network issues. Our YouTube feed is intermittent. People can still see us on Boulder Channel 8. That is still working, but I just wanted to let the public know and you know that we were having some network issues.
So if you can't see what's going on, there's a reason for it.
That is true.
Okay, but we are recording it though, and it
We
will
are
still
indeed.
be available in
We
the
are
future. Thanks. Mark?
Just one more piece on that for Council Member Spear. We are analyzing 2025 sales tax data overall, and so We got that information today, and so just try to give you that information, but we still have some work to do on our end, and we'll provide that as soon as we finish that analysis.
Ryan?
Mark, you were discussing the timeline, and I forgot the phrase you used, but you said something about with the June hearing, there was implications, or there was some, could you say more about the reason why we have the current timeline, and if we were to move it so that, students were here, what that would do?
Yeah, absolutely. What I mentioned in the outset is just there are implications for how much engagement we're able to do, how much data analysis we're able to do with that current June tentative date. We are able to move that schedule based on council direction. If we were to move it in the fall to ensure students were in town, we could do that. We would just want to be clear on the scope of the engagement and the scope of the research that council is asking us for. But certainly at council direction, we could change that date.
Can I call a quick? Thank you. So with that too, it sounds like there may be some additional time at least to get some more economic data and things if we were not to be pushing toward a public hearing in June. Would we have any time to do more engagement on this? Because I know, it sounds like it's, you are busy with other things too, I understand. So just wondering if we could, if there's additional information. I've just been thinking about it from the perspective of students.
Thanks for the question. If the timeline were to move out, I think we could do some additional engagement. We currently don't have, a huge amount of budget or staff resources for this project, so I don't think we would be doing something like the 2024 minimum wage study. But certainly we could spend a little bit more time advertising the opportunity to engage and maybe holding an in-person, meeting or two for community members, but without I think without additional time and budget, it would be hard to do much more than that.
Did you have some more? No? Good. Right. I'm not seeing any more hands raised for questions. Oh, okay. Tina.
And I had one question just in general about students being here, not being here. It appears that the sales tax for restaurants tend to be higher in Q2 and Q3 every year. They actually have higher levels of employees, I think, it's their hiring. Do we know how to also capture the voice of the people who are here in the summer when they're at a higher capacity? I'm trying to figure out which group we'd want to, ideally all. Am I making any sense?
Yes, you are. So I think you're asking how could we capture maybe people here who are working seasonally and CU students?
Right.
Is that right?
It seems like we have two shifts, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have any information on whether employees who are working in the summer live here or work here otherwise. So I suppose there is a trade-off there.
Okay. And the other piece is, how do we find out more about wage theft? You touched on it in the memorandum, but it didn't give me a lot of clarity to what we know is happening and then what we suspect that is not being reported due to fear and other reasons.
Yeah, we can look more into the data that's provided by the state. It is incomplete, and so we were hesitant to dig into it too much under this timeline, and it is incomplete. And so we don't have any indication that wage theft questions or claims are overrepresented in the restaurant industry in Boulder. We can certainly look more into that data, but just note that it's not a complete data set.
So does the city regularly get information about wage theft?
So we checked in with the Office of Human Rights, and they have received 3 questions that are related to tipping in the past year or two. So we don't get a ton of questions. I think most of those were really questions, not wage theft claims.
Okay, okay. All right, and then the other piece is, I was looking at and thank you for providing the data around employment in Boulder County, and it showed that there was some job losses in the restaurant industry in the last year. Is there a way to find out how much is in the city versus the county?
Thanks for the question. I think so. We received the city employment data from Boulder Chamber, and they have a subscription to a data service. And so I think so, but I don't want to promise. But I think it's available through that. The city data is not available through like the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's only at the county level.
Okay, because I'd be curious to know if those trends are just consistent with other trends or if they're unique to the restaurant industry in the city of Boulder.
Mhm.
And then have we talked about doing very specific outreach to people who are not tipped in the restaurants and what they might be seeing in their experience?
So for our proposed engagement approach, we intend to have flyers and QR codes and encourage anyone to participate. So it can be tipped employees, non-tipped employees, general community members. So we're not planning to discriminate in any way in terms of who we're trying to reach through our engagement.
Okay, I'm specifically interested in whether people are receiving the same opportunities for shifts, tipped and non-tipped, that they were 5 years ago.
Okay.
Which could be for a variety of reasons. I'm not jumping to an assumption.
We can look at asking that type of question in our questionnaire.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Matt? Oh, actually, before we do that, our rules of decorum say that if you have a sign, it can only be there if it's held. So there's one propped on a seat there. If you wouldn't mind either putting it away or holding it. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I don't know if it's data we can get now, but it's important that, as you know, certainly going back to 2024, it's a question about just our overall minimum wage policy, and at some point we're going to want to look back and see what the impacts are. And I presume we're tracking information going forward or looking to make sure we have the data. And one piece that in here makes me wonder we might be having a missing gap, and I want to ask if that's something we look to track or can get, is we just looked at whether a restaurant was open or closed. But open or closed doesn't necessarily convey the health of an industry, because if they're contracting but still open, that tells us also that it's not healthy versus waiting for the death, right? More or less. So I'm just wondering, are we looking at that in any way, or are we intending to look at that? Because that transient between being healthy and closure is really important. So are we picking up any of that granularity, or do we intend to?
Thanks for the question. I don't think we have access to that data now. It is something we could ask in our questionnaire. That won't be statistically valid, and so I don't know how good of information we would get. I think if we were to want to get statistically valid information, that would be a bigger scope.
Let me just follow up. Is there a place that we could see what we're tracking with regards to the overall conversation of our economy and minimum wage? Because again, we set that policy in 24 with the hope that we would track it and track the impacts. But I'd like to sort of know, like, well, what are we tracking? So we actually can maybe have confidence that at some point when we come back to it, we've got actual real information that we can depend on versus spotty or something like that, right? So I just want to know, is there a way?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, what we're pulling are available data sets and trying to do some analysis based off of that. A more comprehensive review of what the impact was of minimum wage over a period of time. I think we can scope a research project like that. It would probably take some outside help to do. So that, I think that's what Megan's getting at, is just that's probably attainable. It's just not easily available at our fingertips and beyond our staff capacity. So we'd have to scope it, figure out what a timeline costs look like, but theoretically it's possible.
All right, Rob, and then Tara.
Thanks, Mayor. When you're polling the restaurants, it seems like when I've looked back at polls, the minority segment is the toughest to capture. And in this time with ICE, some of these minorities might want to just keep their heads under the radar. How are you going about to get good representation of some of these smaller businesses that will really be impacted by this?
That's a great question, and I think we can look further into that. I don't know that I have a great answer right now. I will say that the online platform is completely anonymous, and so we can certainly communicate that as we communicate the opportunity to engage. One of the organizations that we're planning to engage with, and let me make sure I get the name correct, is the Latino Chamber of Commerce for Boulder County, and so that might be a place where we can advertise this option, this opportunity to engage. We're also planning to engage with the Boulder Area Labor Council in hopes to get feedback from workers as well. So we can continue to look for those opportunities.
When you do that, will you have a delta of the restaurants that were polled that responded versus the restaurants that were polled that didn't respond within those demographic groups?
No, I don't think so. No. So we're not going to be polling in maybe a traditional sense of the word. So there will be the opportunity to engage, but we won't be tracking, types of restaurants that respond versus not.
Totally volunteer?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi. Tina mentioned that there were jobs lost in the restaurant industry in the past couple of years, correct? Can you tell us those numbers? Was that in the packet and I missed it, or?
That was a question that came in separate from the packet. I'm happy to send that information out. I will note that the state of Colorado experienced job losses overall over the past year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems in keeping with that general trend. I didn't look a lot at employment outside of the restaurant industry, but I can certainly do some more digging.
So you don't know, like, offhand how many jobs were lost in Boulder County? Okay.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands raised for questions. So it's time to ask council about which options we would like staff to explore further. So I'm going to get to some straw polls on the options that were presented by staff. I know Councilmember Benjamin presented one, and if somebody wants to lay a new one out on the table, that would be a surprise, but it's not illegal. But what I'd say is that if folks want to speak to their thoughts on that before we go to the straw polls, you can do that. I would just ask you to keep your remarks relatively concise and avoid long speeches. Yeah, clarifying question.
Just a clarifying question before we get into this one and the next question about timing. There's obviously 4 staff proposals. I made a 5th, and I'm just wondering, does staff have a sense of what's like the maximum number of proposals that we could push through? What's the preferred number to stay on what we've already agreed upon as a timeline? Obviously, if the timeline changes, that throws everything out, but I'm just sort of curious if the June timeline, did you guys say, hey, we'd really love you to have 2 or 3, or I'm just sort of curious if there's a peg that we're aiming for.
That's a good question. I mean, I think when we're planning for community engagement, especially with this approach, the simpler the better. So, 3 or 4, I think, is manageable. I also think going further than that, it could just start to confuse people, and, people might get weary of the questionnaire. So I would try to keep it to 3 or 4.
And if I could add, I think that's right. And some feedback that we received during the minimum wage conversation is there was a lack of clarity, or at least a perception that of whether or not it was on the table that we may not increase the minimum wage. And so I think getting some clarity tonight on what is on the table so we can communicate that effectively would be helpful. Even if it's all options, ideally you're narrowing, but the more clear we can be, to Megan's point, the better.
Got it. So if people want to make a concise remarks, now's your opportunity. I got Tina and then Mark.
Well, I was wondering if Matt or if Councilmember Benjamin could give a 60-second and no more description of his option.
We got me under pressure. I put it in the hotline, so I would say refer to my hotline for a long-winded response, but I'll try to do it in 60.
You're 10 seconds in.
It is. Effectively, this was at the bottom of the memo of 2A. It mentions that we could follow an Edgewater model, which would temporarily freeze the tipped minimum wage at $13.80 for a time to a date certain. So my proposal was pause the tipped wage at $13.80, which is currently what it is here, and have it expire and sunset January 1, 2029. So we have our backs against the wall and a commitment that either by that time it sunsets, or we act on a more comprehensive strategy that includes minimum wage and tipped minimum together. Then whichever one happens first would then supersede that pause, and then that new policy would take over. So either before 2029 or by Jan 1, 2029
that would occur. So it's a pause, 1380, and goes to 2029 until we decide otherwise in a comprehensive strategy.
I clocked that at 52 seconds. Yep.
Can you explain why you call it 2A plus freeze? How is it like 2A?
Yeah, so it was. I mean, I was trying to work within how staff presented it. I mean, why staff didn't present an Edgewater model, that's a separate question. But if you come down on the staff memo at the very bottom, there's a sentence that says, with option A, council could explore keeping the base wage for tipped employees at $13.80 in 2027, thereby increasing the tip offset to 4.37 and then increasing the base wage in subsequent years at the same rate as minimum wage. That's basically the Edgewater model that it sort of slipped in there. So 2A modified, I was just expanding on what staff kind of already delivered there as a sub option to 2A, and I was expanding on that. So that was what I was trying to achieve. So hopefully I didn't misrepresent what staff was doing with that sentence, but that's how I interpreted that.
When I get to straw polls, I may call it option M. So comments? Clarifying question? Go ahead.
I guess my question with this, what are we going to call it, option M? Is that we spent years and tens of thousands of dollars doing a regional minimum wage study. We had economic modeling, worker surveys, employer surveys, focus groups, all kinds of engagement. And when the consultants' recommendations and the community engagement came back, the majority of council didn't follow them. And so I guess my question for you, Matt, is sort of around that idea of engagement, right? Hundreds of workers and businesses participated in that 2024 engagement. We told them that their input mattered, and then we threw the majority's preferences out the window and adopted something very different from what the engagement recommended. So, given we didn't follow the last engagement, given we didn't follow the last recommendations from this study, would we follow the results of anything, or have a majority of people here just made up their minds? And in that case, it doesn't really seem like there's value in spending a bunch of people's time looking into this. It feels like the engagement is maybe only going to erode community trust if we do the same thing again, where we're gathering a bunch of engagement, spending time, whether it's this year, whether it's next year, but we're not ultimately going to change anything. I guess I just wonder why we would delay. I don't think we have a good track record of following our engagement or comprehensive analysis on this issue.
Fair question. I'm not sure I could answer the whole thing because that's not really my place to answer all of it. But I will say that when we did all of that minimum wage engagement, none of that had anything to do with the tip minimum wage because it was unlawful for us to even touch the subject. So we're broaching a subject that none of that outreach actually or research gave us any insight into because it was not allowed. So I think that these are just sort of really separate conversations, and my goal is to actually reunify them because we couldn't talk about tipped wage when we were doing minimum wage, but now we can, but we're not set up to talk about minimum wage. And so we're in that sort of place of trying to throttle. We are reacting to the challenges we face right now in a lot of aspects. I would just say the purpose why I brought that up is my goal is to protect the existing jobs and not see them get either let go or have their hours further reduced, which I think would be even greater harm to not just our workers, but to our overall community. I want to try to protect those jobs and giving a lifeline to those employers to try to protect those jobs as best we can is something that I think is worth us considering in this moment. So that is the motive for that is to try to protect those jobs as best as we can and make sure that they're working as many hours as possible and not continue to contract.
Okay, good. Maybe very short, because I'd like to get to people's comments rather than a back and forth.
It's just, so at that time, we were also talking about raising the minimum wage faster to meet Denver or to meet the county. And we didn't because of the tip credit. So would that be part of this conversation too, that we would revisit the minimum wage as a whole and consider doing larger increases?
I don't have an answer for that now because that's not what we're discussing right now. But that's exactly the motive of why we would probably, and hopefully, whoever's here in 2027 would make a council priority to go on the process of
having a comprehensive plan to have that exact discussion. I don't want to shy away from that. I think we should have a unified conversation. That's why staff, I think, answered a good question of what that process would look like if we decided to make that a council priority. So we can't keep talking about them in silos. I would like to get to a comprehensive strategy here at some point. And I think next year is a good time to start.
Okay, I'd like to go to people's thoughts on this topic, and we'll start with Mark here.
I start with the premise that we have an industry that's in a bit of trouble. And I think it's incumbent upon us to deal with that situation. Now, some of that statement is based on anecdotal information as opposed to a long-term study, but I think you only have to walk down the Pearl Street Mall to see a number of vacancies. You have to talk to the restaurateurs, and you will know that they are dealing with the pressures on them by cutting hours. And so I think there's a problem here, and we're supposed to be problem solvers. And so I do not want to wait for 2 years to address the problem, at least initially. We can always adjust what we do later. I was impressed with Councilman Benjamin's proposal, including, and perhaps especially, the sunset provision in it, which enables us easily to adjust if things are not going as we see fit. My personal preference would be 2B, but I could live with 2A. I think 3 is a little too much, and I think the status quo is not enough. If staff says that they can do all of the engagement and all of the analysis within the time period that Councilman Benjamin's sunset exists, I'm fine with it. But I do not want to make studying the issue of minimum wage and tip minimum wage be the tail that wags the dog. I think we need to do something. And so whether it's 2A or 2B or Councilman Benjamin's proposal, which I do endorse, I can live with any of those things. But we ought not to be leaving here without some consensus on doing something. And making this process subject to 2 years of engagement and analysis is not addressing a problem that all you need to do is walk down the mall and engage in conversation with restaurateurs to know that it exists. So I may be putting too many things on the table, saying I could live with 2B, I could live with Councilman Benjamin's proposal, and if worse came to worse, I could live with 2A. But I do want us to do something.
Thanks. Who wants to go next? Tara.
First, I want to answer the question. I would say to take 3 off the table for sure. I would like to take 1 off the table because I like to compromise, and both sides have you can listen to both sides and say, yes, I can see those sides, both of them. So I feel like 1 is not a compromise, and 3 is definitely not good for workers. So that leaves 2A, 2B, or 2M. But I do want to say something else, and I would like for us as a city to do more to support our restaurants beyond this immediate relief effort. We all agree that the city processes need to be better and faster and less expensive, and I know staff is working on those improvements, but we really have to move much faster than we are, a much faster pace for our restaurants right now. Any code language that increases costs or adds unnecessary complexity for restaurants trying to open, expand, innovate, or make improvements should be eliminated immediately, like as in tomorrow, to be honest, because we're asking for compromises in this, but we as a city have to lead the way. So if we're asking everybody to compromise, we should be the ones to lead and immediately, do something about some of these problems. So can we create a dedicated restaurant division within planning and development, even if it consists of 1 person or half a person? Or its purpose to be to fast track permits and drive meaningful code improvements this year, not next year. But whatever mechanism we decide to use, as a city, we should be leading the way, as I said, in supporting our restaurants, and waiting till next year, even on this, to me, is unacceptable. Just think about this, and I'll end with this. The moment a new restaurant signs a lease, rent payments begin. Even if it takes 90 days or 100 days just to secure a permit, and then months more back and forth with the city, it can easily take 9 months to get your permit and to finally open your restaurant. That's 9 months of paying rent when your restaurant isn't even open yet. Who can ask people to do that? National chains can do it, but our local businesses cannot do it. So if we care about preserving our local restaurant community, and I mean the whole community, I believe we should act on this other thing with urgency. So I'm asking staff to consider simultaneously doing something big.
Thanks. Who would like to go next? Ryan.
I agree with Mark that our business community is in trouble. And it has got to be a priority that we are helping our businesses, and we need to help them cut costs, and we need to make it easier for them to do business. I don't think, though, that the way is to take income from our tipped wage earners, many of whom were just hanging on even before the destruction of our social services, other basic services, war on minorities and immigrants that's coming from the federal administration and Congress. I think if I'm doing the math right, we're looking at something between 500 and a little more than 5,000 annually per worker to take off of what would we do if we continue with the current path. I think the way forward is that we need to find ways to rise tides for everyone. We need to ensure that businesses have reliable power and they are protected from these ridiculous power outages. We need to increase our utilization of commercial buildings and create a more vibrant business ecosystem. We need to facilitate employee ownership models that can build wealth for everybody. We need to streamline permitting and cut out the red tape. We need to invest and improve our emergency services. And we need to make our transit work better to help our workers save money and to create better access for customers. So to close, our business owners are facing headwinds and our tipped wage earners are facing headwinds. And I would like to see us focus on things that will unite us. So I'd prefer to go with option 1.
Thanks. Who wants to go next? I got Nicole.
No surprise to anybody here. I would like to focus on the status quo, which doesn't feel like either status quo or really a compromise to me. The compromise happened in 2024 when we chose to move forward with much lower wages than the consultant recommended, and that the community engagement informed, all to make sure that tipped wages increased at a pace that wouldn't have such a big impact on the restaurants. The slowest and lowest increased option from the economic analysis in 2024 suggested we would see a 0.4% decrease in the restaurant workforce if we matched Denver by 2035. We went even lower and slower than Denver. And while we don't have any data, I imagine that the impact would have probably been projected to be even lower than 0.4%. Tipped workers are telling us they are struggling too. Why aren't we listening to them? We have a 9% renter vacancy rate right now, the highest in a long time. Workers leaving the city matters just like restaurants leaving matters. And I would argue that having more workers in the city helps our restaurants because then we have more people there. We changed the minimum wage trajectory in 2024. We haven't seen the impacts of the 2025 increase yet. We're still getting information an hour or two before the meeting tonight. We haven't seen the impacts of this year's increase, and the 2027 increase hasn't even happened yet. And now we're proposing to change it already. We've heard some feedback, but we haven't put the economic data in context. Restaurant sales tax data may be better than everybody else's. We don't know yet because we don't have that information. Trust in government is so low right now, and one of my biggest concerns is that moving away from what we proposed and all the engagement we did is just going to exacerbate that trust, and perhaps some of the engagement will bring it out. But we already had this conversation. We already compromised. We already got to something. And changing a horse mid-race doesn't seem like the greatest idea to me. I would love to let this finish up and then do what we committed to do in 2024, which is to look at this when we actually have data to inform a decision.
Thanks. Anybody else? Rob?
Yeah, thank you. It's a complicated subject, and I see it from both sides clearly. And there are a lot of factors in here. There's rent, there's insurance, there's escalating food prices, there's housing costs here. What I don't want to see is what happened in Denver in 2024, where 200 restaurants closed. 82% of those were, well, that statistic doesn't matter. I just don't want to see that decline here. I don't want to see our local restaurants replaced by national chains. I think that if we give our restaurants a little bit of breathing room, they can actually put more money into the restaurants, creating more vibrant places, potentially hiring more workers, having more hours. My fear is that if we don't do anything and we keep the status quo, those restaurants are going to just see declining revenue. They're not going to have the money to put back into marketing or sprucing up their place. They're going to cut hours, and it's going to be exactly the opposite of what we may think would be supporting the workers. So I'm going to say I would support 2A, B, or M.
Thanks. I got Matt and then Tina and then Taisha.
Appreciate the conversation. Just to maybe start with a little clarity and then intent. Seeing that 2%, that the new numbers on that 2% for restaurants is impressive. I have to say that it has to be taken with a big grain of salt because this was the year without a winter. And the extraordinarily good weather is what really dominated people going out down to Pearl Street. And so I think we have to recognize that and say, good for them. Hopefully that's not the trend because that means we'll never see water again in our community. But we have to understand the reason for why that was the case. And actually, when you talk to the restaurants, March was one of their worst Marches in recent history. So just let's keep that in mind. Coming back to raw numbers, assuming a tipped worker makes the same in tips, and you're just focusing on hourly. Just that tipped minimum wage number, regardless of tips, in a week, at $15.50, what would be next year's number, is $530.25. That's per week on just the tipped minimum wage. I've talked to dozens of restaurants, most of which, a vast majority, have been cutting their hours about roughly 10% each year since the minimum wage hike went up, which makes sense. They said they would raise prices, cut hours. They said that those were going to be the ways in which they could actually make the math work. And so if you take that 10% cut and assume, well, they're going to do it again because they've had to do it each of the last couple of years, that's a 5 hours a week that a tipped worker is losing in their hours. And when you put that together, that means that if we did a freeze, here's what's crazy. That's still a $75 a week loss if we kept the wage the same. So losing 5 hours a week is more harmful to your weekly paycheck than losing the wage, or at least having the freeze. And so I just think we have to be real about what we're trying to protect here. And I think for me, I want to protect the workers as much, but I don't want to see them keep getting fired or their hours get shrunk to nothing where they have to depend on 2-3 jobs to make ends meet. And this is really difficult. So it's not easy. And I think the restaurants need a little love so that they can pay back a house and they can make those investments that are needed to attract more customers and really make this work, because we need a shot in the arm, and hopefully we can get there. Hopefully this doesn't last that long. So I'm going to take off the worst case option here, which is number 3. I'm not interested in cutting anybody's pay. And I don't think we're here because the status quo is working. And so I think number 1 needs to come off as well. And so I think I'm going to go with 2A, 2B, and that sort of modified 2A. I don't like anything ever being named after me. That's never fun. So in any event, those three options I think are viable for us to continue to study, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll retract the naming after you if you prefer. Tina, and then Taisha, and then I'll go.
Thanks. So yeah, we're hearing a lot that things aren't working in our restaurant business, and I really appreciated the people who spoke today who recognize that and understand that there are just different factors happening right now, and many of them are structures we've inherited that are incredibly difficult to fix. And I appreciate Ryan's comment about better power and better transit. I think it's unlikely, sadly, that we will fix those in the next couple of years. So I'm focusing more on what are our challenges right now and what we're hearing right now. And also the county effort to, which I came in late because that started before I was on the council, but the county effort was really challenging because none of the other municipalities joined us. So the entire premise of the whole effort kind of failed in that sense. And now we're ending up with 3 different wages in Boulder County, a county of 330,000 people, and we might be adding another variation, which I'm probably going to support. So it is really frustrating, and we can't lose sight of the progress we've made with minimum wage. So I want to be very clear to staff's question, do I support a change in the minimum wage, slowing it down? No, and I don't support number 3. However, I do feel like we need to consider some changes in the short term to help restaurants. The data that I asked for was whether we have lost jobs, and it looks like in the last, from 23 to 24, we had a decline of 4.2% of our restaurant force was declined, and so, or 675 jobs in Boulder County. And so that's why I'm wondering, what does the city look like for those numbers? And that is a significant loss that's very different than what had been forecast when we went into this. So with that, the other piece is that we're simultaneously pursuing this visitor economy in our comprehensive plan, which has some idea that we're going to have restaurants of different prices and not just emulate the chains that you can find in any town in the United States. And I'm very, very specifically looking to support the local businesses. I was somewhat curious in some new minimum wage law that's looking at New York, that looks also at the size of your company and whether there's a way to look at these different groups differently. And so all that being said, somewhat long-winded, I'm sorry, Aaron and team, but I would support 1, 2, 2B, and M. I'm going with 4 because she said 4.
You were still under 3 minutes, so I'll take it. Taisha.
Thank you very much. I agree with my fellow council member who reminded us that significant compromises have already been made, including myself. I was the vote that made it, for us to make that initial compromise. And so I am saddened to make it seem as if we haven't made any compromises to get here. I also just say in general, either we're going to use valid and reliable data to inform decisions, or we're not. 3 to 4 weeks to gather the types of data that we are asking for, the types of community engagement that would be necessary, I don't believe will result in data that is reliable and valid. I also just have concerns around the assumptions made, even in your example, Councilman Benjamin, around, if we assume this, and then we assume this, and then we make another assumption. There were like 5 assumptions in that. And I don't want to make assumptions when data is going to be available in a time frame that is reasonable. I also have concerns around the increased vacancies, and to the points already raised. Are we doing, what are we doing to support those businesses? Those aren't, to me, the whole restaurant industry and the way that it is financed is flawed in its design. It was never designed to be equitable across the board and to be fair. And so we are already on our heels for an industry that is just designed poorly when you think about other industries. And I really struggle with that. I also agree with Tara on looking on what can the city do to reduce the fees that we offer to and have for restaurants. And in addition, I would add, right now, the only things that we've considered are labor costs. But when I talk to restaurants, and I too have talked to dozens of restaurant owners, and the main two costs are labor and food. And our city owns 16,000 acres of agricultural land. What are we doing to help support our restaurants in accessing food that's going to be cheaper? And we know the supply chain has been severely disrupted even in the last 4 months, but I would argue since the new administration came on, there have been disruptions. So we know that the cost of food, I was just at the State House talking with the Senate Ag Committee, and there were conversations about the anticipated increased costs of food and food prices. And so there are definitely things that we can do that are urgent and important that won't take years per council member Marquis's comments. And ultimately, I would caution us to minimum wage tip-splain to people who have been on record via via emails to us, via public comment, that the assumptions made, the 40 hours a week in the study is not accurate or aligned with their lived experience. So even the data that is provided there is flawed. Either we're going to use valid and reliable data to make decisions, or we are not. There is nothing that has been presented here that would let me know that in 3 to 4 weeks, and I respect y'all deeply and you know this. However, we have never agreed on a research and evaluation. And this is another example where we have different tiers of quality as it relates to research and evaluation.
And
I
Taisha, I wonder if you
support
might
the status quo, which we did very significant research and evaluation to collect that. And I do not support any of the others until we have sufficient data to make valid and reliable decisions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I'll go now. And I'll say, this is a complicated subject with trade-offs on all sides. I am sympathetic to the challenges that the restaurant industry is facing, and we all want them to be successful. But I struggle here with it if we do not increase the tip credit if we do not increase the tip minimum wage as we have been planning to do, that may have a minimal kind of percentage effect on folks who make very, very good tips. But there are a lot of folks out there who make a very modest amount of tips for whom that change in their base compensation would be really significant. And I am really concerned about the plight of workers these days with the challenges that we're seeing in our economy. I also am interested in continuing on essentially the path that we set before, which we set on a couple of years ago, to then analyze and see after we get through those initial steps what the data looks like. So my preference would be for the status quo. I would say, Tara, what you said about permitting was really good. Other folks have echoed that. I would love to see us give other forms of support to the restaurant industry and reduce costs in other different ways. So I would prefer to go with the status quo. I will note that 2A does give everybody an 8% increase still. So that to me does seem like it's worth considering because it does still give everybody the 8% increase that we have been planning on. So I would keep 2A on the table, but I would not include 2B, 3, or the other option for analysis moving forward. So that's what I got. I believe Mark had a double dip, but maybe this is a quick one so we can move to straw polls.
Well, I'm very greedy, so. I just want to first say that I want to go back to Ryan's comments. Every single word that he said was correct, but many of those comments were structural in nature. It will be a very fortunate day when we have a mass transit system, for instance, that will efficiently take people where they need to go and when they need to go there. So I agree with all of it, but I don't think all of it is doable in the near term. Some of what we have done, or some of the pressure we have put on the industry, comes from the fact that we raised minimum wage correctly and justly by 24% over 3 years. It was the right thing to do, and we did that. But now we're finding that we have an industry that is dealing with other problems, some of which results from the wage pressure, some of which results from the cost of food, some of which results from high rents. But it's a problem, and either we're going to address it or we're not going to address it, and I would prefer that we try to solve problems, not duck problems. And I think there is some relief that we ought to be able to offer to the restaurant industry in terms of restraining the increase in the wages that they pick for a year or two, so we can properly analyze everything. We can see the impact of what we have done, and we can adjust as is necessary. So I remain an advocate for either 2A, 2B, or M, and I'm happy to have a sunset provision in any of them, although I prefer it to be 29. Was yours 29, Matt? January 29?
That's what I started with.
I would actually go out to 2030 to give us enough time to chew on this at our leisure for as long as staff would like. But at the end of the day, we will have a new regime based on data, or we'll change our minds.
Okay, very good. Yeah, just maybe briefly, but I would like to get a
Very brief, just in point of fact, this council could decide that we will have frequent, ubiquitous public transit. That a decision we could make and decide we want to resource. So that's not just other folks. We could work on that, but just wanted to say that. Thank you.
All right, so thanks everybody for your comments and for keeping them generally concise. I appreciate that. So I would like to go to our straw polls to see what we want to keep on the table. And I'm going to get through the different options, and then we'll turn to staff for kind of responses or for next steps. So who would like to keep option number 1, status quo, on the table for further analysis? Show of hands. I got 5. So that'll stay on the table. Who would like to see 2A move forward for further consideration? And that's got 6. Who would like to see 2B move forward for further consideration? That's got 5. Who would like to see the number 3 maximized tip offset move forward? That's 0, so that dies on the vine. And then who would like to see, if people are a majority interested in, we'll probably have to pin down a couple details, but who would like to see us further analyze Councilmember Benjamin's proposal? And that's 5 there as well. So it looks like we're only taking item number 3 off the table, so we'll be moving forward with 4 options for further consideration. But I'd like to look to city staff to say, do you need further direction than that?
I think that's helpful. At least you didn't go up from 4 net. I will say that, and maybe you were getting this, Mayor, on Councilmember Benjamin's proposal, just clarifying a bit on the scope of the research would be helpful. I don't think we need to do that tonight, but I think when we bring that back, we'd like to clarify exactly that. Obviously, the timeline has implications for work plan and all that.
And I might suggest that number 3 be a nod of 5 separately, as that's separate from the number, but in terms of scoping.
What's the question? Because I'm curious, what is the question?
The direction that staff work on minimum and tipped wages in preparation for the conversation at the next retreat. Just, it's a work plan.
Well, let me just ask, because there are 2 components to this, because there's a numeric component, and then there's a research component. Were you looking for definitiveness on the research?
No, I was just looking for if they had an idea of what that timetable would look like should we start the research. I was assuming that if we did any of this would require a council retreat priority, in which case I know how heavily overloaded staff is, so it wouldn't be starting that research now. It would be, if you think it's going to be a year or whatever it is to do the work, then we can decide in the next retreat if we want to make this a priority then I have a sense of what that would look like. So there's no really research component outside of what the regular piece here. So it's really three pieces, right? It's the freeze, and then it's the sunset, and at least for me, it's a commitment to come back to this and look for a comprehensive strategy if that's the will of council at the retreat in 2027.
So in other words, it's just a number proposal at this point.
In a sunset.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. So that's so no, not a 5 needed. Okay. You had a clarifying question, Nicole?
Oh, I just want to make sure we're still going to talk about the engagement.
We are. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Quick.
You remember my speech that I gave a little while ago? I'm wondering if that is at all possible to do something this year. Mark?
Happy to try and answer that question. I think some of the things, yes, are part of our work plan in our new Cultural and Economic Development Office, such as looking at areas for process improvement. We did start a process a few months ago. You'll remember a group called Cities Work that was providing a little bit more information on the experience of small businesses going through our processes. We are almost done with that report. So that's one example. We think there will be some insights from that will lead us to some process improvements that should help businesses, including restaurants. We are open to others as we go through that process. So it is something we're looking at. I think, proposals like having a dedicated staff member would be a little bit trickier.
Okay,
But certainly in terms of process improvement, that is something we are focused on from an economic.
So how's this? Do you know that silly rule that we have about that brewery situation with the 1,000 feet?
I'm familiar.
Okay. We all know it's a silly rule. Why can't we just get rid of it tomorrow? Is my question.
Tara, I think that might be off topic.
Yeah, I would just
today.
say that if there are if there are suggestions about how to improve some of the concerns that we may have in our restaurant community, we welcome them, but I would suggest that is outside of this current conversation. No.
All right, I guess not for tonight's decision or discussion. Okay, so that's our second question. Our third question is, does council support the proposed timeline and engagement approach? So if anybody would like something different from the proposed timeline and engagement approach, this is your chance to speak up. Nicole.
Yeah, and also I just, while I have the mic, want to take a moment. There was a comment made earlier about Denver data and how Denver saw a massive drop in restaurants in 2024. Just wanted to clarify, that was because there was a change in how they were tracking licensing for their restaurants. The Denver Auditor's Office, I believe, was the one that looked into that. They can probably clarify it, but it wasn't a massive drop in restaurants. It was a completely methodological issue in how they were tracking restaurants. I think, because we can't commit future councils to work or dedicate future budgets, I'm not sure, that we're going to be able to do much more engagement than whatever's been proposed this year. I'm not entirely sure that we need a whole lot of it if we have already made up our minds, and I think that is the part that I'm still not quite sure of. If we are determined to move forward with this, as it sounds like we are, I would suggest that we move a public hearing to the fall when CU students would be around. That would also give us the opportunity to get a little bit more of the questions that Matt, you and I both had a ton of them. I'm sure others did too. Get a little bit more of that answered. It would also, if the workers who are here over the summer, if it's a seasonal pool of workers, we could also get input from them, and I imagine we could do some questionnaires during the summer too when we have those seasonal workers. So we would have time. We would also have more time in the fall to see the 2025 economic data. At the moment, we don't have that. We don't have data, any kind of reliable data or full data set on what happened with our first change on January 1st, 2025. And I think if we were to just stretch out the timeline just a little bit, we could get a little bit more information and make a more informed decision that is based on at least some bit of data that we have at that point. I just don't think we're going to have that in a month, and I agree with Councilmember Adams that trying to do this conversation in 3 to 4 weeks doesn't seem to do it justice. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think if we just slowed this down a little bit, restaurants would still have their answer by the time we're to the the fourth quarter. And I understand that they also need that information and need it as soon as possible. And also, I really think we owe it to community, given that we are changing the compromise we already agreed to do at least a little bit more engagement. Like, I would love to see this go to Human Relations Commission, because they weighed in 3 times last time. I don't even know if there's time for that to happen at this point, if we're trying to get engagement done in the next 4 or 5 weeks.
So I think Mark had his hand up next.
First, a question. Could we put the timeline back up?
That was quick.
No, I would support that timeline. I think we need to get an answer, whatever that answer is, whether it's a status quo or any of the other alternatives. The restaurateurs need to know, and they need to know sooner than later. And there are, it is possible to over-engage, and it's possible to over-analyze. And I think we need to be active or proactive in this case, and not kick the can down the road.
Tara, and then Matt.
As far as having it when the students are back, I'm going to remind everybody that we have Zoom now, and anywhere in the whole wide world, you can actually come to our public hearing. Isn't that awesome? But I would also say that if we remember, everybody involved in the county assembly and the caucus knows that that was done during spring break, and there was no opportunity for anybody to come remotely. We do have that. I like the timing, but I also don't see why people can't join remotely from wherever they are. That's my question. Also, I will say about compromise, because you guys keep telling me that we did have to me, it didn't feel like a compromise back then. It was the best that I can do to keep, I would have done it differently, but I compromised. And so I feel like with political units like us, that we have to keep compromising. It's not like we did it once a few years ago and now we don't have to do it again. Our whole lives are compromising, competing interests and trade-offs. So we have to just keep doing it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think for helpful context, as Mark said, what we did in 2024 was absolutely the right thing to raise the minimum wage 8% for 3 years. That was absolutely the right thing to do. The only mistake we made is we didn't make that decision soon enough to give the businesses that were now going to be saddled with those higher costs, and even the workers, to decide what's going to happen, any time to react. That decision was made, I think, in October officially, and you had literally 2 months to set your budget and be ready for the implications of that. And that was really unfair to those that had to make those budgetary decisions. That was the reason why at the retreat we were very clear that we wanted to do this so that there was enough runway, so no matter what decision we made, there was time for adjustment. So throwing it back to the fall again really just creates Groundhog Day of making the same mistake all over again. So I think we need to have the discipline to do the times. We've shown we can do things quickly, and we can make those decisions. So I think we stick with the current timeline.
Great, and I can straw poll this too, but Taisha?
Again, to do our due diligence properly, it's my understanding CU Boulder's graduation is May 1st? First week of May. And that would be the end of our engagement period there. They're in finals right now. I didn't see very many of them at the Colorado Climate Week, although the place was packed, but I didn't see a ton of students there because many of them were studying. My larger point is I just continue, again, as somebody who professionally did community outreach from a public education perspective at the state level and at the federal level, I just continue to be concerned around this window. Our research team would not think that would be valid and reliable to get the level of information that we need. I don't refer myself as a minority in general. I'm actually the majority as a woman. So I will just be specific to racial and ethnic minorities. I do appreciate Councilman Kaplan's comments regarding the increased mistrust with racial and ethnic minorities, and I have continued concern or additional concerns around getting valid and reliable data from them in that very short window. I also want to recognize that we just came off of a year and a half of rigorous community engagement for the Boulder Valley Comp Plan and a variety of other issues. So I also just have some concerns around survey fatigue, which again is also an evidence-based concern. I appreciate my colleagues' comments around making the decision as soon as we can. However, if we're making decisions without the best available data, then we are not making evidence-based decisions. And I thought we prided ourselves on making evidence-based decisions. If we don't even have the data from 2025 and we're going to make a decision in June, I don't understand how I just don't. And it's not even a belief; it's a guarantee. Because we're missing an essential piece of data, and I continue to be very, very concerned. So my preference would be to extend the community engagement time, and I would push back both the public hearing and the council consideration until, at the very least, we have the 2025 data. Thank you.
Thanks, Taisha. And I just looked it up. Graduation is May 2nd for anyone keeping track. Tina.
And I do have a quick question. When is the 25 data available?
Specifically the sales tax information.
And the workers, the contraction or expansion of the industry for both county and...
We do, my understanding is we do have the final sales tax information, so it's just a matter of us refreshing our analysis on that. I don't know about the labor information for 2025.
I looked today and the Q3 2025 data was posted on the state's website. I can look into when they're posting Q4. It doesn't take much time to look at that data, so I can turn that around pretty quickly.
Oh.
We don't have control over timing.
But it's not more than a month away, or?
I don't know. I'd have to follow up and see if I can find out that answer.
Okay, well, I do agree that that data is important to understand how 25 closed, because that was a year that we had the 8%. And I also agree that it would be helpful for the businesses to know as soon as they can so they can plan, and it's really important. So, for me, if that data is available and we can do outreach, the outreach I'm really, really interested in is people working back of house who might lose hours. Many of those people are Spanish speaking, and many of them are relying on that job as their full-time job. And I just want to understand what the impact of that is community. That's my other interest. And when we look at the possible job losses in 2025, is how many of those people are now accessing full services and unable to find a new job. So have we actually contracted the market, or is it not so? So that was not our hope when we went and did the 888. We were hoping that that would not happen, and I'm hoping it didn't. So I'm trying to get confirmation of that.
Thanks. And I'll just chime in here, which is to say I'm really torn because I would like to know sooner rather than later what action, if any, we're going to take for certainty for both business owners and for workers so everybody can plan their budgets. So I like earlier rather than later. I am sensitive to the engagement question of doing it during summer break. And then this is a little bit of a surprise, but I just learned very recently that I'm actually going to be out of town on June 18th. So I'd hate to advocate for a day in which I couldn't actually participate. So I'm open to moving it later, but I just don't want it to be late in the year. So I'm fine with a delay, but I don't want it to be September or October.
Can I fix my
Yeah, do you have to fix something?
Of course I have to fix something, of course. Whenever I speak extemporaneously, I have to fix something. Going back to what I said about my compromise, I do want to say is I was really happy that we came to 8, 8, and 8, even though I was initially worried about it, because I think it was a really, some people might disagree, but I think it was a really good compromise. A lot of cities did nothing. I'm just reminding everybody that all of our sister cities did 0, and we at least did 8, 8, and 8, and I was really happy about that, and I'm proud of it. I mean, if I could be so, blunt, just because it was braver than a lot of the other cities. I mean, and we were brave about it. So I just want to I'm patting myself on the back. No, I'm kidding, I'm not. But I do want to correct and say that I was very happy with the final 8, 8, and 8. just in case anybody doesn't.
Thanks for clarifying. And by sister cities, you meant other cities in Boulder County, not people in Tibet and Nepal.
Wait, let me correct myself.
Okay, Ryan, and then I want to move us on.
Yeah, I'd support the idea of moving it so that we can have student participation in the fall. There have been some ideas preferred about how there could be counterintuitive effects to tip making wage earners, and I would like to hear from them. I think that's an important idea that will, in fact, if we increase your wages, then that could have a negative impact on your hours. I mean, I really think we should put a call out to hear about this. So I think there's a case, and we have a number of council priorities I'd love to be talking about by June also. So yeah, I suggest we move to the fall.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and straw poll this. So all in favor of continuing with the proposed timeline up on the wall, please raise your hand. I got 4. All in favor of choosing some other alternate timeline, raise your hand.
I wanted to go with your option.
What was my option?
In between. You said I can't be there June 18th, but not looking for September, October. I wanted that one.
Okay.
Plus, you need to be there. I'm not doing that meeting without you.
Okay. Tara's not running the tip credit meeting. She's putting her foot down. Yes, Nicole.
Okay. What I was wondering is if we could ask CAC to look at this. I expect, staff, we've given you lots of questions. You may have some information on when you might have some answers too. Look at what data we can get by a certain date. Also, that'll give us some time to check when are students back. Oftentimes, the students who are working the tip wage jobs are not living on campus. They might be coming back earlier in August. So I think it gives us some time to ask some student groups too. Could we do this in sometime in August as well? So I think there's some potentially good things there, but maybe CAC could assess that and let us know.
I like the CAC direction. I got a hand up from Matt and Robin.
I mean, I think we're just leaking here for the sake of delay and not willing to just make decisions. So I think what we run into is recess. So if it's not here, it's after recess. And I think, again, if we're interested in urgency and Aaron's not here, the first available date's July 23rd. And I don't think we just play this game where we just keep kicking it around and keep making the same mistakes over of giving no one time to adjust. It just seems like it's Groundhog Day. So I'll throw out date certain, but if we have to go to CAC, that's fine too.
Rob, do you have a thought on this?
I just have a question for Megan. The Q4 data, just based on how you're getting Q1, Q2, and Q3, do you have any kind of guesstimation when you might receive that?
I'm sorry, I don't, but I can certainly look into it and get back to you.
Okay, so what I got from the straw poll is there weren't 5 folks who wanted to proceed with exactly this timeline, but there's a majority that would like to see it push off at least a little bit. But I'm hearing maybe a commission to CAC to work with city staff on what the timelines are regarding when the data is coming in and student arrivals, and then figure out a date at CAC.
I'd appreciate that. Only in looking at CAC, we've got 2 items that I don't know if they could move, and that's BVCP adoption and potential ballot items scheduled for June 25th. So if we could have a moment to take a look at what that looks like and maybe call the state for the data, we would certainly get back to folks.
Okay. All right. So TBD, subject to CAC discussion. Can you all work with that?
We can.
Okay. What's that?
Mayor, should you straw poll that?
Sure. So folks who would like to see some form of delay dependent on data from city staff on the various data that's coming back in, subject to CAC scheduling, raise your hand.
What do you mean about some form of delay?
Yeah, TBD, subject to data and then CAC discussion.
I'm not going to leave it out in the open.
I just don't want to, I don't think waiting until the students settle in is viable, though.
We didn't say that. We said some form of delay. So people who would take that approach to the CAC, come back and get into it. We're going to be looking at that, although it's not necessarily definitive. So do we have a majority on that? So this is okay. So folks in favor of taking that approach, CEC figured out? Okay, that was 5. Okay, so we'll wait to hear more information from city staff on these various bits of information, and then we'll come back and CEC will schedule it. Do you have what you need from us?
I believe we do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That was a little convoluted, but it's a complicated
Yes.
and fraught discussion. So thanks so much for all of your work and for bearing with us. And Elisha, I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. Okay, well, folks, thanks for a good meeting. And I will go ahead and close us out at 9:04 p.m. 4 minutes over.
Not bad. 4 minutes over?